effect.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast. What a amazing conversation I have for you today. It's funny how the world works. Life is so unpredictable. So let me just give you a little bit of a backstory about this podcast. My good friend Jack, also known as Dr. James Lyons Wheeler, who is a Ripple Effect podcast past guest and also a Union of the Unwanted past guest. He suggests guests on my show from time to time. And I get an email suggesting Dr. Jessica Rose because of her amazing work that she did analyzing the VAERS system, which is the vaccine adverse reaction system, and her whole insight in the coronavirus and her understanding of the immune system and viruses and all the stuff that obviously is COVID related. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Usually what I do is I look up the guest and see like, okay, is it somebody that seems interesting? Is it somebody that I feel like I'm going to click with in a conversation? And I quickly looked her up. I couldn't really find much about her. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb with this one. I'm just going to take his recommendation. And I'm going to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's book something. And I figured after I book something, eventually I'll do some more research and I'll find out, you know, who she is and what she's into and all that stuff. Well, I got busy. I didn't have a whole lot of time to do that. So I kind of went into this podcast as almost like it's a blind date, right? Like you don't know what you're walking yourself into. You hope that you and this other person are going to click. You're going to have some type of chemistry and have something interesting to chat about, but you don't know. And the day came where it was time for us to connect. The day comes and I'm a little nervous because I'm like, oh God, I'm like, can I hold a conversation with this person? And I end up having one of the best conversations I've ever had on the podcast. We talked about so many different things and we went so deep in regards to the coronavirus, but we went so deep in regards to us as people, our thinking, our philosophies, our ideas, our perspectives. It was such a deep conversation and a really enjoyable conversation. And we have very little on the surface in common because she's in Israel, she's a PhD, I'm in Massachusetts, and a special ed student who barely graduated high school. And yet we had so much in common and so much to discuss. So it was just such a fun conversation. And I can't wait for you guys to listen to this. And I can't wait for you guys to listen to the whole thing and give me feedback and tell me how I'm wrong. I'm kidding. I doubt you guys are going to say that. I have amazing listeners who always seem to enjoy the conversations that I enjoy. So I hope you guys really enjoy this one. Also, don't forget, this is a value for value show. If you're in a good financial place, then yeah, I have a Patreon page. I have a PayPal account. You can tip me. I have a merch store, the Ripple Effect Podcast, merch.com. And I also have a Rockfin channel. Rockfin is a YouTube alternative that doesn't censor people. You can tip people on there. You can get everybody's free content just for signing up. And then if you like what you see, you can get people's exclusive content, but tons of free content. But those are all the ways financially you can support the show. But if you can't, because let's be honest, a lot of us are in shitty financial places. If that's the case, share the show, review the show, thumbs up, subscribe, do all those things to any of the places you watch the show or listen to the show. The show is available on all the podcast apps. It's also available on many video platforms like Rumble, Float, Odyssey, BitChute, of course, Rockfin, and I'm probably forgetting one or two, but it's in a lot of different places. So wherever you're watching it or listening to it, write a review, thumbs up, all that type of stuff, share the show, upload the show anywhere you want, put the conversations out there, and the more the merrier. The more places the conversations are available, the better. So enjoy the conversation. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. I believe
Hi.
Hey, how are
Yeah,
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad.
Wow, nice musical instruments in the background there.
Yeah, yeah. I always get compliments on them. They're picking up dust now. I think as you get older, it gets a little harder to find time to pick them up and play them. But they
Yeah.
look good, so at least they have some value.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, they're works of art as well as you know, instruments to make art, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, no, they absolutely are. Especially some of them. I mean, when you really look at them, just the amount of work and effort and craftsmanship that goes into it, it's really cool. That's why I think a lot of people just like looking at them. They even if they don't play them, they want to pick it up. It kind of catches your attention if you see one, because of those reasons. So, without a
Yeah.
doubt, you play music or anything or any
I
instrument.
do. I actually have albums on the internet.
Oh,
um,
oh,
yeah, I live in Israel now. I ended up here because I came to do a PhD, and um, so yeah, there's a huge music community in Tel Aviv, especially, and so I became a part of that because I was kind of a musician anyway. I started with the bass guitar, and then I moved to the drums, and I turned into a keyboard player here. So yeah, I joined a band called Altneuland, which is the name of a book written by a guy named Theodor Herzl about like a utopian style Israel. Anyway, so yeah, we recorded a couple albums, and it was like 80s inspired electronic kind of music. It
like
was a good band actually.
like Depeche Mode kind of.
Yeah, very similar because actually our lead singer he had a voice like, he was very very deep voice, very unique. You either hated it or you loved it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's funny because I grew up listening to metal, and I had this love
I all right.
for metal and like electronic music. And really, like when I was real little, like they didn't really collide too much. But as like time went by, you start seeing like just this. A lot of people intertwining the genres, where you saw. I mean, there was bands like Fear Factory that was kind of doing it. Kind of early with the real heavy, they kind of start off as like a death metal band, then they started adding keyboards, and now you look at that,
Yeah.
it's like not a big deal, but at the time it's like, there's videos of like Metallica smashing keyboards because they hated disco and they hated all that, anything that was like electronic. But now you see it in the metalcore scene, which was not too long ago. You start seeing a lot of heavy bands just mixing the keyboards with the guitars, and it adds another layer to it. But I think they're both kind of fringe, uh, not so mainstream genres, and that's kind of what people liked about them, and that's why I think the audience is kind of intertwined a little bit.
Yeah, I think they have the same heart too. That's what I would say about it because I love metal. The metalheads are like the purest, like most intelligent beings I think you can find, and
That's
the death metalists especially like the people who love Slayer are like the smartest people I know. Anyway, but like the same thing with it's like the kind of, I don't know if you want to call it grassroots electronic lovers, like the people who like Kraftwerk, for example. It's like it's this same kind of authentic heart thing. So it doesn't surprise me that they're fusing. But yeah, good music is good music. That's what I think.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. What was amazing when they came out with like a Depeche Mode tribute album, and I remember when I first purchased the tribute album, and I'm like, wait, Deftones are on here, Ramstein, you could kind of see Ramstein being on there, but so many like bands I didn't expect to like Depeche Mode. It was kind of like one of those things, like, oh, I don't know if it's cool to like synth pop or even though they actually got really dark after. I mean, I really like their later stuff. They've kind of, they were kind of known for the people are people and kind of the synth pop stuff, but they got really dark,
Yeah.
and they have some really good stuff later. But like you said, like good music's good music. And I've always, growing up, I always say I'm like, I'm not really a musician, I'm more of like an artist, because I
Hmm.
didn't really focus on the technical aspect of it. I never felt the need to have to like show off my skills. It was more about like what struck a chord emotionally.
Yeah.
And like I would always tell people, I'm like, you can get and I remember playing when I was, my brother and I had a metal band that would kind of mix a
Mhm.
little bit of electronic music with metal, and we were trying to do it like super early. We weren't very good at it, like some of the bands now, but I could my vision was to kind of do some of the stuff that was that's going on now. But you could see that like we would play with bands that technically were way better than we are. Like they could play anything and everything, but once they threw an original song, they were awful. And then you'd have us who played like we didn't play any covers, and we would play all originals, and people loved us, and it was because
Amazing.
yeah, because I wasn't trying to. I would never write music for the like I always try to put ego aside. It was always like, okay, some of my favorite songs were some of the easiest songs to play. So I'm like, so how difficult it is to play was never really a factor. It was like,
Damn straight.
yeah, it's about like, okay, what do I feel? Do I sense something? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about art, is that it taps into the most human aspect of us, and that's like our emotions. It's like it's funny because a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, I think a lot of people's opinions they think are they're defending them based on logic and reasoning, when really there's some emotional aspect of it that's swaying you in one direction or another
Yeah,
that we
so
ignore.
true. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of beliefing going around rather than what would be the analogy. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get to that, I'm sure. What's your favorite band?
So Maiden was like the first metal band
Wow.
I really fell in
Nice.
love with. I was a big Maiden fan. I felt like they were a little underappreciated. I mean, they're obviously big, but in the States, it's like everybody loves Metallica. And I loved Slayer growing up. But really, Fear Factory was, I've been lucky enough to have Burton C. Bell on the show, the singer Fear Factory. But they were like one of those bands that just like are you familiar with Fear
I'm
Factory?
not, but I'm going to be now that you're mentioning them.
Oh, dude, they're some of their. It's funny because even their themes, like this man versus machine, they had a
Oh,
lot of this like
nice.
man versus machine theme, which I loved. And
Okay.
I was a big fan of like Terminator 2 growing
Oh
up. You
man,
know,
I am a
so,
Terminator girl. I have them all on my computer.
so to me, it was like a perfect because Terminator 2 was like one of my favorite movies as a kid. It like blew my mind.
Me
I
too.
remember watching it, and I'm just like, this is the great. And it's funny how it even stands up. Like you watch it, and like so many movies around that era, the special effects are horrendous. But Terminator 2, you watch it, you're like, wow, this really isn't that bad.
I
This
can watch
still
it
is.
now in like in the same setting as the very new one, which is wow. That's mind blowing. This the guy that they create to be the bad guy in that one, but they're both easy to watch. It's on par with each other, and it's amazing that there's like what 2 decades in between them. I don't know, maybe not that long, but yeah, no, every single no, a couple of the Terminators I didn't like, but the last one, the most recent one, is so good. The casting person was a genius for this movie, like perfect characters, totally believable. But yeah, so Fear Factory, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, look at the double bass. They have like this machine like just precision with like the double bass and the guitar. It just like I mean, they had one album and where the drummer had this idea. They always had like the craziest drum beats, and the double bass would go perfect with the guitar. So when the double bass would go and stop, the guitar would go like it was just insane. It
I
sounded like
love that.
it sounds like a machine. And then they had this one album where the drummer's like, well, as a musician, you kind of play up to like where you're comfortable playing. So it's hard for you to come up with a beat where it's you're uncomfortable, right? Because you do what you're comfortable doing. And so what he did was he created all the drum beats on a drum machine, not
Hmm.
even knowing if he was capable of playing the drums, those beats,
Amazing.
which was a genius idea because I'm like,
Yes.
you can come up with the craziest beat and then just figure out how to play it afterwards. And so that's
Damn
what they did
straight.
for one album, and it was like it was unbelievable. And I'm like, okay, it makes sense. You know, it makes sense. It was actually, I actually got it. It was funny how like old movies, how the impact that it has on people's lives. Like I actually got exposed to them. I had a couple of kids I went to school with that liked them and bring up their name, but then I remember Mortal Kombat, the video game, and then it turned into a movie, and they were on the soundtrack. It was like them and a bunch of really good bands. Mortal Kombat 2 had like Gravity Kills on the soundtrack, KMFDM, which is a
Yeah.
German band,
Yeah, I know them.
electronic band, yeah. And then Fear Factor's on there, and I'm like, the name itself, like I was sold. I'm like, Fear Factor, my god, great name. And then when I heard them, I'm like, whoa. So they and it's funny how like Terminator 2, Fear Factor, like all this man versus machine stuff, like now that we're getting closer to that actually being an issue, you're like,
We're in it.
yeah, we're in it. Yeah. Wow. And it's just like now you look back like, wow, man. Like I remember observing those themes and just thinking like, wow, this is, I'm never going to see this, you know, this is never going to be an issue in my, you know, in my life. And now you're like, wow, I mean, it's like right around the corner, and it's something that we're discussing in a serious manner. And so it's wild. But that is funny. You know what I love about my show is that I'll have people on to talk about something, and I try to keep the show so casual that we'll go down some rabbit holes where just like, I guarantee nobody's ever heard this guest talk about this topic because nobody, you know, so it makes it fun. Because so I am going to keep all this in because I think it's fun and people like
Awesome.
of the show.
Yeah,
And
well, everyone wants to talk about music, right?
yeah, that's kind of the thing. You know, that's the cool thing about concerts is that one thing I loved growing up. You go to a concert and you would see, you know, black people, white people, Mexicans, Middle Easterns, what, you know, whatever religion, whatever skin color, and we didn't care about any of that stuff. Like we would just
Nope.
be talking about the bands that are playing. We'd all be enjoying it. I mean, it's almost like a spiritual experience because you're there and you're all kind of absorbing the same entertainment and the same thing, and you're feeling it all at once. I can, you know, going to concerts, I remember thinking like I can see how like at the DNC or RNC, like you get all these people that are kind of brainwashed with politics, but yet they're sold in the moment because of
Yeah.
that group. Everybody's kind of absorbing and experiencing the same thing, and in that moment you feel like, yeah, this is it. Like I feel it, and if I feel it, it must be real. And
Yeah.
so it kind of gives you that experience. But the cool thing about music compared to other things, it brings people together. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't really you know, separate people like other things like politics and other things.
Yeah, and it's not superficial at all. It's a very tangible thing. Like I'm not a big concert goer, unfortunately, but I did go to one in Tel Aviv. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's like a couple of guys. I think they're from Norway. Forgive me, guys. They're from a Scandinavian country, and they have a group called Carbon Based Life Forms, and it's like completely electronically generated. But man, you know, I'm not a kind of floofy person. I'm very actually like serious and cynical, but this band really, like when you listen to them, they elevate you. I guess if you're ready to be elevated, I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of like rhythmic and ethereal, and it taps into nostalgia. And I think this is a universal thing. Like no matter who you are, it has the capability to tap into your nostalgic brain. So I went to this concert, and there were like people from, you know, all over the place, and there was this one girl I remember. She was like like a very cool looking chick, covered in colorful tattoos, and she and I instantly, we didn't know each other, we just looked at each other and we were like, I can't believe I'm hearing it live, and I'm not on a train listening on my iPod or whatever. And we just like instantly bonded and freaked out, and like the whole like 3 hours that they played, we were like, I don't know. It was a real thing. Like yeah, music is powerful. Oof.
It is, and that's why when all these musicians, especially the punk rockers who've been getting vaccinated and going out
Oh
and
dear. Yeah, I know.
oh, how's that affected you? What's your opinion on that
Oh
stuff? Because
well,
it's been
I've been, and I'm not going to be ashamed to say this. I have been asking the very hard. Now this is on online, mind you. I've been asking very confrontationally the very hard questions from the very beginning, because where I live, there have been no questions. There has been no resistance to full injection because there's no transparency. It's a complete travesty here, if you ask me. So, yeah, I don't think there's any excuse for not knowing that there's something very seedy going on here now. But people are still, they're deciding not to be paying attention, because now they're starting this child rollout, 12 to 15 year olds tomorrow. And my best friend is a mom of three little girls, and she says she doesn't know one parent, same age group, age 11 type thing, who is even questioning injecting their children. It's insane. It's insane. So anyway, on the music thing, you weren't allowed. I think it's different now, but I wouldn't know, because I'm not a participating member of society anymore, because there's this medical apartheid going on. The green passport was installed, and if you don't have that, having gotten 2 doses of the Pfizer or Moderna product, or can prove antibody, formation in your plasma, then you don't get access to the passport, which means you can't easily travel, you can't fly, can't go to restaurants, can't go to gyms, you can't participate in society, no concerts, nothing like that. So, so my friend, I'm in the music community, and they were announcing, oh, finally we get to go back to normal. And they were announcing concerts, and I'm like, oh yeah, so that's just for a few people, right? That doesn't count the people who are, taking a little bit of time to do a risk benefit analysis, which is absolutely essential right now, because I mean, we're not even talking about red flags here. There's zero about what's happened in this country specifically, like that 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 isn't like, what, when you think about it from a medical perspective, from a science perspective, from a political perspective, from a, like, every vantage point you can approach from, it's just like, what? And no questions asked from the public. It's crazy. So yeah, I don't have any problem saying, yeah, you guys are supporting something that is so anti artist. It's so anti music to me. It's so anti freedom. It's so anti what what everything beautiful and elevated and musical is about. So it's this weird hypocrisy. And I don't know how else to approach it except to call it out, you know, say what it is, call it what it is, and hope that people will start saying, yeah, they might be right about that. Maybe I'll think about that a little bit harder. So it's a really hard subject, though.
It is.
Wow.
When you hear about punk rockers, people who are like anti-establishment, all of a sudden like falling for this trick, I mean, it blows my mind.
It's
I'm like,
impossible to believe, right?
it doesn't make, I mean, so I say it doesn't make sense initially, but then you think about it, you're like, okay, are they really are they anti all establishment, or are they just only anti the other establishment, like whoever isn't on their political team, and that's the thing that kind of is bothersome. And I get it, because the thing about artists, and I've uh I've never been good at monetizing, I've never been good at any of that stuff, because at heart I'm an artist. I just want to create.
Yep.
And I mean, I've been doing this podcast since 2013. It took like fans to be like, hey, can you give us some options to like donate some money and help out the show, and like, so, and then I started a Patreon page, and I always feel like, I get people like, hey, why don't you do marketing, why don't you do I'm like, I just want to create and hope that everything else falls in place. And I feel like these other things, like money and all these other things, will get in the way
Yeah.
of creating, because then I start focusing on that stuff, like, okay, what type of topics get the most hits, and what
Yeah.
type of, it's like, no, and I'm a big believer, like, open source. So this show, after this conversation is done, like and it's uploaded, it's on every phone app, it's on every video platform, it's on all the alternative platforms, and I let people just like, hey, take it, put it anywhere you want because the conversations are more important. And
Yeah.
so to me, like that type of thinking like this, so and I guess my point of bringing this all up is as most artists and talking to many of them throughout the years, and just I guess being one, is you're more focused on your art, and so that means a lot of like tapping into emotions and being a emotional person, or caring about others. And when you look at political parties, like which political party have we been sold cares about people and doesn't and cares less about money? It's like, oh, it's the left. Like I relate to the liberals because the left, they care about like people's rights, and they're not like uh you know corporate people, they're not capitalists, so to me it's like and I think that's the trick that we've all been kind of falling for, is like this idea like, oh, they're on my team, they're like me, and it's like, no, 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 they're all playing, it's all political theater, they're all playing the same game, and that's just trying to appeal to a group of people to get our votes. And then at the end of the day, they're just as they're just as pro war and pro military industrial complex and pro spying and pro all this stuff as the other side. They're all working and helping the same people.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, that's one of the things that I deal with. I'm dealing with every day. I'm kind of like kind of been thrown into a new life, as everyone has, I suppose, from this analysis that I've been doing of this VAERS data. And so I'm getting people from all walks of life, from my past, from my really distant past, from my present, from all over the place, asking questions. And the one thing that I'm seeing as a common theme, regardless of what people are asking about, like are we asking about adverse events, are we asking about politics, are we asking about like da 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 da, is this division thing. And the most insidious place I'm seeing it is within the core family structure. And it's so sad. It's like politics, left, right, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same. It's all the same. There's, as soon as, like, I know that there are some very smart people who say that you have to pick a side if you're going to have character or something like that. But I think in these times, it's absolutely essential to do the opposite. Don't pick any side, because that's kind of in the design, it's in the infrastructure of this plan. And that's what this is. It's a big plan, and it's playing out perfectly, maybe not perfectly, but pretty well. And so, like, yeah, the creation of this new lexicon with these anti-vaxxer with x's, and I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, to me, it's so transparent. It's like you're setting up a system where people have to decide, and then you're pitting them against each other, no matter who they are. It doesn't, there's no racism here. It's like everyone's against each other now. And these fake concepts. I mean, I've been saying this for over a year. Nobody's an anti vaccination person. Everybody wants to be healthy. Everyone wants their kids to be happy and healthy. Everyone wants the same thing. What's lacking here is any kind of true transparency and information about what we're facing and how to deal with it. I mean, if you ask me, every single government, every single one is culpable. Every single one is responsible for this absolute shitstorm that we're seeing right now. It seems very, very decisive and divisive. And wow, yeah, every day I'm seeing it. In every way I'm seeing it. And it's sad. Where are you? Uh,
So I was
where
I
are
was
you?
I was originally born in Portugal, but I grew up in
Ah,
Massachusetts.
wow.
So I live in there's a small town in right outside of like Springfield, Massachusetts, called Ludlow. It's a big like Portuguese Mostly
Amazing.
Portuguese, but and then a big Polish community too. But a lot of foreigners here, so it's cool to.
Is it normal there? What's the vibe? Like how's your life?
Massachusetts has been basically China. I mean, it's been
Oh,
just this whole idea of like the government's trying to protect you, and it's like it's been very, very like we've been very behind in regards to opening up, very much behind. I mean, we've been one of the most vaccinated states in the country.
oh,
Everybody's falling for it. They keep falling. I mean, it boggles my mind how many times I've had to tell people who are like, yeah, I just got vaccinated just so we can open things up, or to
it's
protect a loved one. Oh, my husband's high risk, all this stuff. I'm like, and it's so often I have to like stop and like just like, okay, stay calm, Rick. Uh the truth is the vaccine's not going to stop you from spreading it. It's not going to stop you from getting it. So all this BS about you getting the vaccine's going to help things open up, or now you don't have to wear a mask because you're vaccinated, is absolutely ridiculous. I'm like, if the mask is allegedly there to stop you from spreading it, okay, and the vaccine doesn't stop you from giving it and spreading it, how does that make any logical sense? If kids are, like now they're pushing for kids to get it, which boggles my mind. I mean, kids have a better chance of getting struck by lightning on the way to get vaccinated than actually like, getting hurt from the coronavirus. The flu, which actually kills young people, and I have two kids, so this whole I have a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old daughter. So I've been very passionate about this topic in the last year. I've always been very involved in like the medical freedom community and just like this idea, and I don't like using the term anti-vax. My kids aren't vaccinated, but I'm
good for
completely
you.
yeah, I'm completely okay with any, and I've had people, friends of mine, who've like listened to certain podcasts I've done, and if I have Dr. Brian Hooker on or whoever, and they'll be like, oh my god, I feel bad vaccinating my kids. I'm like, you shouldn't be mad at yourself. You should be mad at
Yeah,
everybody who suppressed the other side of the argument from you, because as a
absolutely.
parent, you do what's best for your kids, but you can only make those decisions if you have all the information. And
That's right.
one side of the argument's being suppressed. I mean, it boggles my mind how many people, how many doctors, people are like, oh well, there's a lot of experts are saying. I'm like, how about all the experts, all the doctors that have been suppressed, all the doctors who are, even with the coronavirus thing. I mean, just all the doctors that are having success with ivermectin, people who are having success with hydroxychloroquine. I mean, in New York, they ban hydroxychloroquine because everything's a political tool, and hydroxychloroquine became a political football too. It
Yeah,
was like a generic drug that, okay, can there be people who have side effects to it? Of course, because every drug on the market you can have side effects to. Have you ever seen a commercial? I mean, the commercials just have a huge list of side effects. So it's like this drug's been around forever. It was demonized because of the fact that if there was any treatment whatsoever, any alternative treatment, they couldn't justify fast tracking the vaccine. And
yeah. They can't do the emergency use authorization if there's an existing treatment on the market. True.
exactly.
Yep.
And so you see it over and over again where people are just falling for it, and just they're just regurgitating things that make zero sense, and you could tell they've not thought about at all. And I give people the benefit of the doubt, because I think a lot of us who've been in like these conversations and kind of keeping up with these issues for a long time, we could kind of foresee what was happening, and we could see the suppression of anybody who had any treatment or any success that wasn't like pill pushing, and didn't benefit big pharma. But I think a lot of people, just the idea that vaccines can be uh, risky at all to take is a completely new idea. And I think you're starting to see more and more people become aware of this whole topic, and maybe become much more open-minded, because prior to 2020, I mean, just about anybody, unless they were, really did their own research, which is harder and harder to do because all the information is being suppressed. But the most people would just regurgitate, oh, vaccines are safe and effective, vaccines are safe and effective. And it's just like, well, I always use the example, I'm like, if I give every kid peanut butter and jelly, some kids are going to die. because they're going to have allergic reaction to peanut butter. Well, who knows? Maybe they even have allergic reaction to the bread, the wheat, or something like that. But my point is, you
Yeah.
can't give everybody the exact same thing and then say nobody's going to have a adverse reaction. So what really makes me upset is when people look at parents who without a doubt are 100% certain that the vaccine had some negative effect on their child's health and say, oh, you just didn't notice or you just weren't aware of that. It's like you keep track of, I mean, every time my kid learned a new word, I knew it.
Yeah.
So to think that like cognitively, like I just didn't notice there were some issues prior, and we can
Yeah.
let's get, so I'm known for going on these long rants, especially on this topic because I get all worked up about and it's hard not to, as you know. But I'm sure people want to hear much more about from you. Before we get a little ahead, can we rewind a little bit and get into a little bit of your origin story, and then also how you got involved and interested in all these topics?
Sure. Billions of years ago. No, I'm kidding. My origin story. That was a joke. Amazingly, I still have a sense of humor. So I am Canadian. I was born in Ontario, traveled around a bunch. I come from a family of smart people, I suppose. and so I started in applied math when did my first degree. Funnily enough, because I couldn't get into the biology faculty, they were full. So I had to pick something else to do, and I found math easy. And so I did applied math, which is like using math to solve problems. And one of the applications is epidemiology, and you can also use something called ordinary differential equation modeling to model like complex systems, like biological systems, like virally infected systems. So I was like, ooh, how do I do this like for like a next step? So I started an immunology program it was kind of like an interdisciplinary thing. This was all in Newfoundland, Canada. And then during that master's degree, I went to a conference in Cleveland, Ohio, met some of the uh, world leaders in HIV immunology. That was my meet, and one of them took note of I made a little poster presentation, and we ended up having like a 4-hour conversation. And he said, "Wow, I had no idea anyone was doing what we're doing in my lab, because it was kind of like a rare thing." So he said, when you're finished your master's, think about coming to Israel to do a PhD. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And, it was the last thing on my mind. But hey, life happens. And I ended up doing that. Um, and I've been here since then, which is like since 2007, doing research in molecular biology and biochemistry was my latest endeavor. And now, well, actually, I finished my last postdoc early 2020 when this disaster started. And I was meant to go to Australia to surf my brains out because I'm also a professional longboarder. And I ended up canceling my trip because, well, the first flight was going through Shenzhen in China, and that got canceled because, the outbreak was just starting. And then my second flight was through South Korea, and they were saying there were problems at the airport there, and you might get detained, and all this stuff started. And I was never, even though I took this very seriously, I was like the person on the ground saying, take these precautions, do this, do that, da da da. Because I study pathogenic viruses, but I was never ever ever afraid of the virus because I'm pretty healthy. I was afraid of getting trapped in a foreign country in a jail, like that was my fear. So I was like, screw it, it's not worth it. I'll just wait. And yeah, I'm still waiting. So I decided to be a little bit constructive, I suppose, and I wanted to teach myself how to program in R. So I needed some data to do that with. So I picked the VAERS data, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System data from the United States, because I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. And as the weeks progressed, this is a database that's updated weekly. I noticed that it was pretty damn interesting what I was seeing. in terms of the escalation of numbers in an exponential way, and also the presentation of immunological adverse events. So I decided I needed to write a paper and publish it, and I did. And now I'm starting a couple of new projects related to this, talking to a lot of people, trying to get my data out there, because I honestly don't think that any living, breathing person should have to see anything more than what I've very simply presented. I made a little YouTube video too, so it's really easy to understand why what's going on right now is not only atypical, it's criminal. It's beyond criminal. The last time we had a vaccine rollout that was stopped because of the number of deaths, the number of deaths didn't exceed 50, okay? And we are at, and this is extreme under reporting, okay? One of the downsides to the VAERS system is not only under reporting of adverse events, it's under recording. So there's been a Harvard study done and a couple other studies done that puts the number of reports that we see in the database at 1% of the actual number. So it's scary. So we're at 4,547 deaths, and this doesn't include other definitions of death like suicide or spontaneous abortions. So again, this is like an under approximation. And this number is going up every week, and it's always like consistently since week one, it's been higher than 50. So the question, the very simple question is, why is this still continuing if we've exceeded any reasonable death count? And if the immunological adverse events, which are indicative of autoimmune conditions becoming out of control, pathogenic priming, which we can talk about. I mean, we're talking about potentially lifelong diseases or conditions, because you're trying to protect yourself against something that would probably, make you sick for about a week if if you're doing the right things, if you're making sure your vitamin D levels are at baseline, if you're taking zinc, you can also supplement with vitamin C. If you're really worried, or if you're working in a place where you're thinking you're going to get exposed, you can take prophylactic treatments. You can take ivermectin, chloroquine, zinc, whatever. There's a lot that you can do to protect yourself without going to these measures. And I guess what we're seeing very clearly in this data now is that it's not worth the risk. That's what this database was designed for. It's designed to flag potential dangers and risks that weren't caught in the clinical trial data. Like the pre-market stuff didn't notice what's going on now, and that's usually just based on numbers, because the clinical trials, it's only a small population base. This is much larger. So now, I mean, I predicted this, but if you're not a data analyst, or if you're not an immunologist, it might be harder to see. But like I said, I think all you have to do is look at the basics here, and you can decide for yourself really easily, like, no, that's not worth the risk. And definitely when it comes to little people, there's no risk with little people with COVID-19. Thank the Lord, like, why would you? I have statistics now on the problems that are occurring now as adverse events in children due to these vaccines. I did an analysis of kids aged 12 to 18, and there are a lot of them, first of all, in the database. Some of them have died. Cardiomyopathy is becoming a huge problem. I mean, can you imagine a 12-year-old developing a cardiac problem? But it's a thing now. I mean, and if we get into the female reproductive adverse event issue, which is, you've heard people talking about this, I'm sure. This is also becoming very prevalent in this data. Women are losing babies. Like, I mean, I know that that's a thing that happens anyway. Spontaneous abortions do happen, but when you look at it in the context of a this isn't a vaccine, by the way, an injection rollout like this, you have to look twice if the numbers are going up that fast. Like, for example, um, in the last month, the spontaneous abortions have gone up 172%. Like, is that even a number? Can you even say that? But that's what it is. The number of adverse events in general have gone up 94%. The severe adverse events, 85% increase. The immunological, 93%. I mean, you can't not look at that and go, ooh, that's not looking so good in terms of this being a safe products. So yeah. And if anyone wants to know, or if you want to hear more about the fact that, or why this isn't a vaccine, I'd love to talk about that too. Because it's not.
Yeah, I got in a debate with you know who Dr. Robert Lustig is. He wrote he did a lecture years ago that was really popular called The Bitter Truth, and he's I'm a big fan of his in regards to like his dietary information in regards to just how harmful sugar is and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big fan of paleo, keto, carnivore type diets. As many carbs and sugars you can remove from your diet, the better. But so who I had him on to talk about his most recent book, and then at the very end, we went down that rabbit hole of talking about COVID, and we butt heads because I'm like, it's not really a vaccine, it's gene therapy. He's like, no, it's not. And then I'm like, Moderna's never made a vaccine. This is,
No.
it's, so it was like, I'm like, I only have them for an hour. I'm like, I don't want to end it on a
Yeah.
negative note. And it was like the very like last sentence that I don't know how we got into that, but I try to handle it as civil as possible. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of really intelligent people that are just are falling for it. They're falling for it. They're not questioning things. And even in Massachusetts, like just a couple weeks ago, I mean, the fact that like kids had to wear masks playing sports outside
Ugh.
was I mean, I had such this internal dilemma with my son because he's a big soccer player, and I love sports. I love the fact that he loves sports, and he gets a lot of enjoyment out of it, and he learns that you work hard, things that were hard get easier, and he's learning those little lessons. And um and then once everything open, or things start opening up and they let the kids play sports again, but they had to wear masks, I'm like, what do I do? I'm like,
Oh my
my
god.
kid either doesn't get to participate because he's homeschool. We decided to homeschool him as long as they had to wear masks in schools. Where we're like,
Good
we're
for
we're
you.
not sending our kids to school. So we homeschooled them, and then so I ended up getting a medical exemption form for masks, but which was initially a good thing. And in time, and this shows kind of like the social pressure thing, and this whole thing kind of broke my heart. He plays for this local like soccer academy, and we're really which they're really professional in how they do things, and it's not just for fun. Like they're really trying to extract the most talent out of your kid, and my son's pretty good, so I'm really glad that we have this local program. And I didn't want him to miss out a whole year of developing his skills and all this stuff. But he gets his mask exemption form, and he gets to go to soccer without wearing a mask. What happens is that all the other kids are curious why he doesn't have to wear a mask. So people are
Yeah.
always like asking him and like, "Where's your mask? Why aren't you wearing a mask?" To the point where he would argue with me about wanting to wear one just to be left alone.
I
And
know. I
and it broke my heart because I'm like, I'm like, I'm like, you don't have to wear one. I'm like, I get it, but I'm like, if anybody says anything, tell them to point at me, tell them to come talk to dad. I'm like, I'll handle it. And they also have a lot of coaches, so the majority of the coaches knew, but there was always like one that would show up from time to time that didn't know he didn't have to wear a mask, so they would give him ask him like, hey, where's your mask, why aren't you wearing one? And next thing he's crying because he feels like he did something wrong.
Oh my god, it's
you know
so heartbreaking.
yeah,
Oh,
it is. And
Jesus.
even with, and this is the thing, like the long term trauma of all
Yeah.
of this. Like now we're just like, yeah, some Fauci emails came out, and apparently he wasn't taking masks that seriously either. But and we can kind of just laugh it off. This kind of reminds me of like wars. It's I really got involved in alternative media and going down these rabbit holes and kind of questioning the mainstream narrative with the Iraq war and then after September 11th and all that stuff. I was real
Hmm.
passionate about that. And one thing that used to drive me nuts all the time with people who were anti-war and all that after like we're out of a war and we move on, we're just like, yeah, I guess we messed up. Yeah, I guess we were lied to, and we just kind of move on. I'm like, well, do realize like there's people who, because of these political reasons, because of financial reasons, there's people who are never going to be able to just say, oops, we messed up and move on with their lives. They have
That's right.
trauma. They've lost limbs. They've lost loved ones. And it's the same thing with this. I'm seeing it now where just like people have gotten their life back a little bit, and now they're like, oh, yeah, well, I guess they got some data wrong, and we move on. I'm like, no, 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 we can't just say that. We can't just accept
No.
that, like, and forget about this. And you're seeing people just go on with their everyday lives, like they're going back to work. They get to bring their kids to school again. They get to go out to eat with their friends again and go to a bar. And everybody just like, yeah, well, I guess 2020.
Forget
Yeah, forget it. Like, oh, it was a bad. It was almost like we're handling it the same way we handle a lot of.
everything.
It, it,
No, it's absolutely true. And it's infuriating to me because it's like we here have this thing called never again. And I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but I have religious Jewish friends who are saying the same thing. I know Holocaust survivors who are saying the same thing. Or, like, what do you mean? Like, you guys, you general masses, you cannot say that because it's happening right now, and it is comparable. Everyone's got amnesia again. It's like you this trauma that the kids are going to have, they're not just experiencing that stuff's, I shouldn't say that because it's going to make you feel what, anyway. I think
you
it's
can say
unforgivable.
because I'm aware of it, and I mean, my son woke up in the middle of the night one night crying because he said that he was having a nightmare that police officers were chasing him for not wearing a
Oh
mask.
my god, oh my
And
god, oh my
and,
god.
and
Yeah.
when that happened, I just thought about like, holy shit, like, and I try to keep things as no. I had friends over my house the whole 2020. I'm like, listen, you guys, if you guys are comfortable enough to leave your house, my door's open. Anybody can come up.
Yes,
I want to have
absolutely.
social environments. I want my kids to be exposed to other people's germs.
Exactly.
I'm like, I want all those. And I remember telling people real early, I'm like, people know how much I love my kids. Of course, like any parent loves their kid. Would I put my kids in danger's way if I wasn't 100% positive that we were being lied to? And so all I could think about was like, if my kid is dealing with some type of trauma over 2020, and I wasn't even freaking out, what type of shit are those kids dealing with or going to have to deal with when they have parents who are like, don't you dare put your mask underneath your nose, don't you do this, don't you, like, don't touch that, don't touch this, don't, it's like the anxiety and all that issues that were going on with the parents. The kids are sensing it, they're feeling it, it's affecting
No.
them. And it's gonna to pretend that we can just move on. I mean, one thing that's really interesting about children, we were all children obviously at one point, and there's things that happen to us as adults that we can easily forget and move on a past. But as kids, like, traumatizing things that happen to us as kids when we're developing, that stuff sticks with you forever.
Yeah, it forms you. It's like you're forged when you're young. I know, and I'm thinking about this so much, but like I'm also thinking about this from, and good on you for not injecting your kids with this crap. By the way, to anyone who's listening, I'm fully vaccinated for everything. I come from a vaccinated family. I'm an immunologist, so this is an idea that I fully support because it's a genius idea in biology. But this thing going on now has nothing to do with that concept. I can explain to you why from the biology point of view, and I think I probably should. But like the fact that they're rolling out this, can I swear? Am I
Yeah,
allowed?
yeah, I think I read
Okay. All right. So the fact that they're rolling this shit into children right now is it's it's becoming very evident from many peer-reviewed studies and from independent scientists that are not being heard that these kids have a high chance of getting damaged or developing some kind of autoimmune condition that's going to last them for the rest of their life. There are even people claiming that this is going to affect fertility, and I see that in my data, but I'm not making any claims about that yet because I don't know yet. But besides the psychological trauma of this shit show that everyone has been put through, and I know kids are resilient, and I hang on to that hope because they're really smart and they're really funny, and I think they'll be okay. But like the fact that, like, my friend, for example, says that there's no opposition to doing this, it's going to add another level of trauma to these kids' lives. I mean, what kind of life are they going to have for the most part is my main question. Before I forget, the reason I'm saying these aren't vaccines, and by the way, my research, my studying is primarily on the Pfizer and Moderna products, which are the mRNA products, and mRNA stands for messenger RNA, which is these are templates for proteins that we have in our bodies. All living organic beings convert some kind of um, RNA or DNA product via transcription and translation into proteins, which are like the building blocks of life. So this is a normal process. However, what these manufacturers have done is they've teamed up with producers of lipid nanoparticles, which are what they say it's lipid is a fat. So these are like basically really tiny fat bubbles, which are used as carriers for the messenger RNA, which is very fragile, um, so that they can deliver this mRNA into the cells of the host. So these mRNAs are foreign. They're exogenous RNAs. They encode so-called. We don't even know this because we're not privy to the sequences of the mRNAs, but we're assuming they're telling us the truth. I don't know why we would do that, but they are meant to be encoding the spike protein, which is this little prongy thing on the outside of these coronaviruses that the coronavirus uses to infect cells. So this spike protein is immunogenic, which means it stimulates the immune system of humans, and it binds something called an ACE2 receptor. And so the problem is when you inject these lipid nanoparticles containing the mRNA templates into the host, you get distribution of these injected products, and then you eventually get manufacturing by the host cells of the protein, which is going to be the spike protein. So the idea is that your body is going to mount an immune response against this, and you're going to develop a potent antibody response against these immunogenic and antigenic proteins. That's the theory. But I don't think anybody thought hard enough about this because the spike proteins bind ACE2. And for anybody who doesn't know, this is a membrane-bound protein that also has a soluble form that plays an absolutely essential role in something called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or aldosterone, however you want to say it, which is the system in every single human being that regulates blood pressure and electrolyte levels. It's a very essential system. So I think everyone can kind of see, like the potential for problems here. If you have something, in the circulation, and it's been showed in a peer-reviewed study that it is in the circulation, these proteins that can bind these essential enzymes that are necessary to the proper functioning of the system, then you have the very high potential of dysregulation of the system. And the way that this would manifest is you would see hypertension, you'd see clotting disorders, because These ACE2 receptors are found on platelets and it clumps them together when they bind. You would see bleeding disorders. What are we seeing in the adverse event reports? All of those things. So it's like, my point is, we know this stuff. We're seeing this stuff. We're studying this stuff. We've connected enough dots now to say, hey, like, we should stop the rollout in adults, and we should absolutely not push this on children. I mean, there's enough data and information out there right now for everybody to be scared. And I really do mean scared. The potential for disaster here, based on what I think is going on with these products that maybe they know about, maybe they didn't. Whew, it's off the scales. And I haven't even talked about the potential for infertility. I mean, that's another thing. But a lot of women are probably concerned about that, considering we make up about half of the human population. I bet you know someone who has said something about her her menstrual cycle being messed up. Do you know someone?
I do. We've had and we've talked about on the podcast. We've had quite a few people share that they're hearing from close friends and family members that something weird's going on after getting the vaccine. There's a
And
yeah. Go ahead.
and in women who haven't gotten it, who are around people.
Shit.
Like, this is a whole new, like, world of what, in my opinion, because, like, okay, I know about pheromones and I know that women can sync up and there's a lot of mysteries, but like, the fact that it's not only like been proposed that people, and I always listen to people. It's like, that's why I don't get why people aren't listening to parents with kids. It's like, what, you think they're lying? Well, what would be their, like, it's like you have to listen to what people are saying. So what people are saying, and these are people I know and I experienced it too, is that they're not injected. Very, very, like, I don't associate with many people, but I go surfing, so I probably pick up some stuff in the water. But I'm calling it a distal reaction, because you didn't get the injection, but you're experiencing the side effects of having it, from having, like, distal association with somebody who did get the injection. And what the hell? I mean, how do we explain that? I mean, it's an absolutely fascinating topic from a medical point of view, but it's absolutely frightening from an epidemiological point of view, because it's like, what's going on here, and what is the effect going to be, and what are the long-term effects going to be? I mean, any ideas?
I no, but I want to ask you, because the common, when we're talking about these topics, the common argument is, well, look at how many people died because of the virus. So if some people, which is a hilarious argument, because a year ago, or less now, but you know, a while ago, people were saying, stay at home, save one life, every life matters. If you can save one life staying at home. And it's now we're not
Yeah,
talking
no one
about
gives a shit now.
mattering. Yeah, nobody gives a shit. It's like, if the what we're trying to prevent is hurting people,
Yes.
then shouldn't we be rethinking it? But so, okay, so just to be the devil's advocate, what would you say for somebody who says, well, look at all the thousands and thousands, you know, I think allegedly Massachusetts has, I don't know, 17,000 coronavirus deaths, which, even though there's been some local towns and cities that have actually reported, or they've actually told Mass Live, which is like a local newspaper or news station, that the state misrepresented their numbers. And that's happening everywhere. I've had Dr. Scott Jensen on, who you know, I'm sure you're aware of his work and stuff. But so a lot of people are going back and finding, like, car accidents called COVID deaths, and you know, this and that. And so the argument I always find interesting is, like, even using all the inflated numbers, even using all, which we know are inflated. I mean, Dr. Birx said during one of the press conferences that we're counting COVID deaths, or if you die with or by the virus, we're counting them as COVID deaths. She openly said it, and it's like, nobody, like, watched that and said, hey, then maybe these numbers are a little bit inflated, or maybe these numbers are a little bit BS. And yet, if we use those overly inflated numbers, the chances of any healthy person, you know, who's not super old and have all these other issues, the likelihood of it actually being harmful to you is so little. And the fact that they're telling everybody to get vaccinated. The pharmaceutical companies they have it so good because they don't have to market their product at all. Like we were talking about earlier, musicians are marketing it for them. Everybody's is, and I wonder if a little bit's because it prevents them from any lawsuits in regards to false advertising and that type of thing, because
Probably.
everybody is relating things back to normal, not having to wear a mask, and the vaccine, even though there's no scientific evidence that makes any sense. And yet, like, the pharmaceutical companies aren't even the ones pushing that narrative. It's everybody else. And it's like, you do realize, like, the vaccine companies aren't even telling you that it's going to stop you from getting it or giving it. So it's like, so where are you getting your information from? The media, which prior to 2020, I thought we're all on the same page, we understood was a for-profit organization that only cared about ratings. But all of a sudden, you know, they care about the people, just like the government cares about the people. And the pharmaceutical companies, who are criminals and been sued, and so many drugs that are FDA approved and actually have to go through the whole FDA approval process, has been ripped off the market for harming people, and yet something that gets to skip steps and gets to, you know, get fast tracked, you think is a safe product. And not one person is mentioning that, like, hey, there's all these freaking cases, which means what? All these people should have antibodies. So why isn't there antibody tests and saying, hey, let's save this safe and effective vaccine that is going to save lives for somebody who really needs it, because you already got it and you have antibodies. Nobody's even mentioning these things. So
Yeah, they're not allowed. That's why.
yeah, and isn't Israel one of the most vaccinated countries? Right?
Yes. The Seychelles, I think, is number one, and we're number two. I could be wrong about that. I'm not keeping up, but yeah, we are. Um,
And within their numbers, I saw a graph, and it was a while ago now.
that's a real graph.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? The one that, so
Yeah.
the vaccines are going up, but the numbers
Yeah.
didn't lower.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, I made one of those too. It's true. Um, yeah. Okay. So what happened here is there was a deal signed with Pfizer by our prime minister, and yeah, that's what we call him. We haven't had a government in like what, a month or a little bit more, because they're all like, you know, doing these weird secret meetings behind closed doors to figure out who's going to screw the Israeli people next. Um, so yeah, he needs to stay in power because he's like the guy who's been around for, I don't know, over a decade now, and he's too comfortable, and he just refuses to leave.
He's your
So,
Putin, right? Kind of like Putin, who just
yeah. It's becoming like that. So he had to do something to become even more godlike in the eyes. Like half of the population here thinks he's some kind of god. Like, this is not an exaggeration. They think he's like the Messiah. And so he had to do something dramatic for his people. So he made this deal with Pfizer to get all these doses. But the deal was that it would be in exchange for medical data. So all the medical data of the people who signed on to get the double dose, whatever, their medical data, as far as I know, is with Pfizer, and nobody else is privy to any of that data. Or there's actually a 30-year gag order on any kind of adverse event data or data collection from this experiment. So it's like it breaches every oath, every code of conduct. The Nuremberg, it breaks everything. It violates everything, and people don't know this stuff. So anyway, what happened was a group called the Israeli People's Committee, which is a group of amazing people that I'm working with. They got together, lawyers, doctors, and they said, screw this. Like, we're not letting this happen to our people. And they started their own data collection system, and they published it, and it went viral. Not on any, like, it was completely suppressed. We don't even have a media here. We have it's like one of those like reality TV shows. That's what the media here is. So this went viral. And so, the Ministry of Health here had to respond. They couldn't be made fools of. So, questions are starting to come in. So, what they did was they developed their own version. And so they started collecting data like late. But I have two analyst friends who very regularly are pointing out where, how, and why this data that they're putting out is not correct. So they're very reliable. They're not paid to do this. They're just like nerdy guys who are like, hey, this isn't right. So these are the best kind of people to have around right now. And I can confirm this, and I did a bit of analysis myself. And so, yeah, it's just like, it's just ridiculous. Like the stories that people are making up about, oh, everything's so good here. So, no, it's not. Um, anyway, it's yeah, that's the story of here. It's like living in the Twilight Zone. I don't even know how to feel about it anymore. But
That's something I was getting a lot of people contacting me about throughout 2020. Was a lot of listeners would contact me and they're like, thank God for shows like yours, because I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone.
oh
Like
yeah, oh
everybody around me is like brainwashed, and I feel like, am I the only one who's seeing it? Like, what is this? Like, and I can I felt like that too in Massachusetts, because what was crazy is like, so like there's so many just examples of being lied to from, like, Facebook just announced recently that they're not fact checking or banning or censoring anybody who shares information about the Wuhan lab, which
the origin story. I
yeah,
know.
which is like, there's a great meme that's going around. They're like, the difference between conspiracies and the truth is 6 to 12 months, and it's like,
Exactly, I saw that.
it's so true, because I'm like, literally everything I was saying, a year ago, people were losing their mind. I remember on Facebook, people were getting in such heated arguments, and they're just like, I'm like, it's just a bad flu, it's like, and they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, and the crazy thing, and this goes back to what we kind of touched on, was like how quickly people just forget about that. I'm like, we were sold
Yeah.
on, like, if you get this virus, it's a death sentence, and now
Exactly, and people still think that they're terrified of dying, and I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? Do you drive a car? Because if you drive a car, you're way more likely to get in a car crash and die, and that's statistically like confirmed. Like, are you serious? I don't even know where to start sometimes with this. It's like so out of control. It's like
I
this weird machine that like got big.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's just like, well, I mean, at least in America, they use it as a political tool, and it
Yeah.
became so tribalism, where people were just like, okay, my team is saying this, so I defend this. My team saying that, so I defend that. And but it also shows the power of fear, because that wasn't true in all cases.
Yeah.
In some cases, like prior to the election, I was seeing a lot of people that I would talk to at the gym or wherever, and a lot of people on the right who were like, yeah, we should open up. This is ridiculous. Like, this isn't as bad as everybody says it is, this and that. And so people were kind of defending their teams. And I'm like, okay, this is, at least I get it. Maybe they're only defending their team, but maybe that helps them kind of look at these alternative perspectives. So maybe there's some good that comes out of that. But and then next thing you know, the election's over, and I'm talking to people at the gym, and people who were on that side of the argument are now like, yeah, I got the vaccine. Yeah, I just got it because I just want things to be normal. I just want to contribute to opening things up. And oh, I want to travel again. I'm like, they can't stop you from traveling with a experimental non-FDA approved vaccine. I'm like, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, and if my options are I have to test for antibodies or give a negative test everywhere I go, I'll take that over getting some experimental vaccine. I'm like,
Absolutely. I said that I made a video. I made a series of YouTube videos a year ago. Actually, I think it was more than a year ago now. Yeah, it was. It was March when I started. And the very first thing I said before this became very apparently like a shit show was the only thing that money needs to be filtered into right now is antibody tests, a universal antibody test. Because if you can test everyone for antibodies, first of all, the data would be like priceless. And you could technically, you could, oops, Wow, that was bad. You could ask people if they'd be okay with wearing like a festival bracelet type thing or something, just to show other people, if they're afraid, that hey, I have antibodies. You don't have to be afraid of. Like, there were such reasonable solutions at the very beginning, and the fact that that didn't happen, I made a video about it, was one of the first markers that I was like, okay, yeah, this isn't about a virus at all. This is not. Like, if this was a medical emergency, like right after I think it was in March, the WHO proclaimed this some kind of like horrid global disaster. If this was that, then these things would have been done. And this is the other thing I don't get. The medical professionals, the doctors who took the Hippocratic Oath, the scientists, the researchers, the people working for the Lancet, what's going on with you? Like, what happened to the scientific method? What happened to your logic? What happened to to grassroots critical thinking? Because that's all you need to do. I'm not special. I'm not that smart, but I was able to put this together very quickly. And all the people I know who are like tearing their hair out right now because they can't believe what's going on, they said the same thing. And they're from all walks of life: financial advisors, economists, surf teachers, I mean, mathematicians. There's this common thread of just having stopped for a second, well, turn off the TV, and just think and put the pieces together, like, slowly, to assess what's actually going on here. And there's nothing to worry about in terms of a pathogenic virus right now. Yes, it does exist. Okay, there is some kind of thing going around, and yes, it can be bad for some people, but it doesn't have to be. And this is where we circle back to your question about deaths. So I want to get outside of that whole, like, death count thing, because we all know that that's real. What people need to start doing right now, what the governments need to start doing, and this is just from a humanity point of reference. You have to let the information, the science out. You have to let the doctors do their doctoring. You have to let them be doctors. You have to let them critically think, do the thing that they do the thing that they're trained for. Like, Pierre Corey, brilliant guy. He's been doing his doctoring despite all the troubles he's been getting, and he discovered from his clinical practice, from seeing thousands of patients, that ivermectin is highly effective. Nobody needs to get to the ICU. Old people, our elders. This is something that really kills me. They don't need to be dying alone. It's bullshit. So, okay, the damage is done. We should cry. We all should cry, but we should get over it and fix the problem now, because we have a new problem on the horizon, people, and that's the people who are going to start suffering the long-term adverse effects. And we also have an analogous problem with what people are calling long COVID, which is the same thing, and I can explain that why. Um, we have to start thinking about dealing with that, because that is going to be an additional massive burden on the healthcare, like, systems of all countries. I mean, let's get real. Like, if I had all the government officials and all the leaders of all the countries in front of me right now, I'd say, come on, the people, they want the truth, they want transparency, and we want to get on with it. Maybe not all people are enlightened enough to say, I'm not going to hold a grudge, but I am. Screw it. I'm not going to hold a grudge as long as we get on with it right now. Let's stop this nonsense, because all the unpredicted stuff. I mean, I'm sure a lot of this was, in the plans, but there's a lot of stuff when you're messing with biology, when you're messing with nature, when you're messing with RNA. There's stuff that can happen that you can't predict. And if that's where we're headed right now, when we're talking about hundreds of millions of people who've been doubly injected with these products now, I mean, to people in the field, I don't get why everyone isn't, like, just kind kind of looking at the ground going, oh man, we're screwed. Like, we maybe we're not if we do something. It needs to turn around. Solutions need to start being imposed like right now. And before that can happen, I realize that people have to acknowledge that there is a problem, which means we have to get past this cognitive dissonance thing, which is, you know, I was going to ask you about your soccer coaches. Like, have you talked to them about maybe like uh just had a conversation about them with this whole concept of putting face coverings on little people who are running around. I mean, don't they have an issue with that? If I was a coach, my dad was my soccer coach. I played soccer too. And if my dad said I had to wear something on my face, so I'm like, I'm not doing that. So, I mean, have
I,
you?
yeah, against sometimes I'm not the most popular person at parties because I don't stray away from
I don't know what you're talking about there.
I don't stray away from bringing these things up. And it's that is something I would say consistently on the show, is that if you get somebody by themselves and you start talking to them a little bit about what's going on, and you start chipping away at all the the information and giving them, but this is why that information war is so important, because
Yeah.
my concern was always like, okay, I give them all this information, they go home, they Google it. What are they going to be force fed? Mainstream narrative. Speaking of Google, my phone's on airplane mode and it just turned on because I said Google. But it always
Ew.
I know it's weird. But
Spooky.
so the thing is, like, even if they want to get the other perspective, it's almost impossible. I had Mickey Williams
Yeah.
on my show. He was the guy who, the filmmaker who did the Pandemic documentary with Judy Mikovits and Dr. David Martin and all those guys. I mean, the lengths, I had him on for, I think, 2.5 hours or something like that. The lengths that they went to discredit him, to suppress that documentary. It's like, wait. Okay, you might not agree with everything Dr. Judy Mikovits says, but like, does that mean, like, you fight bad ideas with good ideas? You don't suppress it. You don't say that we're going to decide what truth is for you because you're too dumb to figure it out yourself, and so to me, like, the suppression of information is such a big issue, because people can't uh like research stuff and actually find the other topic. I mean, the Joe Rogan podcast, which is one of the biggest podcasts in the world, I mean, he said on one of his shows that he did with Tulsi Gabbard about how he was looking for information about one of the doctors that died in Florida soon after getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
And he's like, I put in the exact information. I went down a few pages on Google, couldn't find it. I went on DuckDuckGo. It was right there. And
Yeah.
who are they protecting? That's what I keep telling people. Like, who are they protecting? Who are they protecting? Like,
The
the
program.
yeah, they're protecting, exactly. And the thing is, like, to me, nobody should be deciding what truth is for me. Like, let me see all the information, and let me get all the see all the evidence, see all the information, then I decide what's a bigger risk, getting the vaccine or dealing with the virus naturally. I mean, herd immunity is not even something we discuss anymore. And if we do, we only talk about it in regards to getting vaccinated and vaccinating everybody. There's just so much evidence of, like, obviously the Fauci emails came out, he how casually he was talking about, masks, how they didn't do anything and all this stuff. I mean, this guy is such a creep and a liar and a PR guy, and he has so much pull. I had this guy, Dr. Joel Hirschhorn, which you might be familiar with him. He wrote the book Pandemic Blunder, and he talked about how Fauci's the highest paid government official, how he spends way more time doing interviews and analyzing any information, and how much, because of him and many others, how many doctors were having success with all these other treatments, uh these alternative treatments, that this stuff wasn't even suggested to the public, and in many ways demonized.
No, no, it was suppressed.
Yeah, it was surprised.
It's.
I mean, in I don't know if you're aware of this, but in New York, they actually made it illegal to
Oh, I
prescribe
know.
hydroxychloroquine. I mean, that's a decision between the doctor and the patient. The fact that politics are getting involved in this is just, what does it tell you? It tells you that it's all political.
And that's the question. What does it tell you? And that's what I don't get. Why aren't people asking that question? What is this saying that we can't even have a conversation about innocuous drugs that have been FDA approved for 60 years. Ivermectin won a Nobel Prize. You know, I was doing some research on it because I actually didn't know the mechanism of action. And it's like, it's really interesting how it works. I mean, it's an antiparasitic and it messes up the membranes of worms, but it also has antiviral properties. So it's mind blowing. In this country, I don't even want to say the name. um, it was I have some connections to the doctors on the ground here, and firsthand knowledge now. Okay, chloroquine was made illegal. Doctors aren't allowed to prescribe it, and that happened. I think it was last November or December, and it was subsequent to the publication. I think it was Raoult's paper, Didier Raoult, but it might have been. You know, there are a lot of papers now. Uh, Clinical studies showing the efficacy of chloroquine when it's combined with zinc. So, like a week after that came out, boom, banned. Same with ivermectin. More recently, I think it was February. A bunch of papers came out saying, you know, this has proven really statistically significant efficacy in just about everyone you give it to. You could be on death's door, and this thing will bring you back, type thing. That's how good it was working. Banned. Banned. Like you, a doctor who should be able to make, like, I actually made a video about this too last year. I was like, this before I was saying anything about this. I said, well, it's just going to come down to the doctor, the GP, and the patient, and they're going to have to make a decision between the two of them. You know, what's going to be right for that patient. But nope, that's not what's going on here. So that's another thing. I'm like, why why is this insanity so easily become status quo with no resistance and no questions? How is that's another thing I ask myself. Is it true that that's happening, or is it just like what I'm perceiving? But I'm looking around, you know, my friends are saying, I'm listening to everyone. I'm a little bit on social media, and it really does look like people have no idea that something bad is happening right now. Do you get that vibe? Like, are people oblivious where you are? Like,
Well, I almost feel like they're just so excited to have what they thought they were never going to have back. You know, they're
right,
excited that, like,
yeah.
okay, I get to go out to eat again. I will say, like, the first time I went to my gym and nobody was wearing a mask, and you know they got rid of the mandates. The first time, I mean, just recently they put up the basketball hoops, and it's like to drive by a basketball or a court and seeing kids out there playing, like it brought me some joy, and it brought me,
Joy.
you know, yeah, because I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, I remember driving around on empty streets with people wearing masks if they're outside and all this craziness, and I'm just like, holy fuck, I'm like, well, will I ever take a drive and look around and like have nothing that reminds me of 2020? And it's you know, so it has brought me some joy. The crazy thing is, I went down to Florida in February, and they're already doing all that then. You know, they were
Oh, I know, I know.
uh,
Florida's been like open for forever.
yeah, and even if like there's, you know, there's certain places where, you know, so I went to like LA Fitness when I was down there, and I was so excited to play basketball. I'm like, oh, I'm like, dude, I haven't been able to play basketball forever, and I went down there, and you go to LA Fitness, they have a basketball court, and completely full, people playing. Like it was completely normal. You like forgot. That's why everybody who's gone to Florida, they
Stays there.
yeah, they stay there, or they wanna stay. I mean, I remember being there, and every single scenario of how I could afford to stay there was going through my head. I'm like, oh, what if I sell
Yeah.
this, or what if I do this, or what if I, you know? And I'm just like, if something happens again, do I want to be in a blue state? And it's not because of politics. I could, you know, I'm a political atheist. I could care less about politics. But to me, it's just like, I know what's going to happen if something like this happens. If you're in a blue state, it's going to be much worse than being in a red state. And
Yeah.
even if it's for political reasons, regardless, I can have some sense of normal. I mean, we went down there, we went to park with the kids. The kids, were around other kids like they should be, laughing and enjoying life like they should be at that age. I mean, they have plenty of time to stress about adult stuff when they're adults. When they're kids, that's what they
Hmm.
should be doing, is laughing, experiencing, and enjoying life. And so to be able to do that was just what was awesome. And places like Texas and Florida, and I mean all these, I think they're going to be some of the most, they already are some of the most popular states in the US. But more importantly, if all the scientists and doctors that have been giving us all this BS information for the last year really cared about your lives and really cared about information and what the science said, how come they're not investigating how the fuck did Texas completely open, and Fauci's on TV saying that it's a historically awful decision to get rid of the mask mandate and open, and yet nothing happened. Like, where's all the scientists saying, well, we got to figure out how is this possible, because we have this lethal virus that's super deadly. They lifted all the mandates. Like, how is this, what's going, oh, in Florida they've been getting together, clubs are open, people are going out, people are gathering. Why aren't there like a huge casualty of deaths down there? When the Super Bowl happened, all those people gathered, nothing happened, and yet after the Super Bowl, we go back to, like, we don't know if we can let fans in certain places. It's like, wait, we just let a bunch of fans in and nothing happened. So how about we,
Yeah.
but this goes back to the issue with, like, one, politicians never admit when they're wrong, and they can't just say, oops, we messed up. And two, they're going to use every opportunity available to help their career, and to give, to basically get more power. And that's what's happened. They've behind this kind of this idea of this deadly virus, like, they've gotten more power. They've had they've, I mean, there's all these other agendas that are being pushed, and I'm a little confused. I mean, I've been going back and forth with, like, which agenda's really the most important, which one's really being pushed the hardest. Because even the vaccine thing, like, okay, you want to vaccinate as many people as possible, I can see that, that's obvious. But is it because they want to push the RNA technology and get
Yes.
people comfort? Is that what you think it is, with just getting?
Yes, I do think that's what it is. I don't think like I've been following this very closely, and it didn't surprise me even before I knew who Moderna was. Like I made again, sorry for plugging myself, but I made a bunch of videos about this subject as well. So I was following it, and the the guys who won the race, who got to the front of the line, were the mRNA guys, two of them. And this is brand new, so technology, which made me go, well, that's weird. How come they're at the front of the line? And okay, so I was thinking about logistics. Oh well, they're not growing the virus particles in cells and attenuating viruses. It's just mRNA, so mass production is easy and mass manufacturing is easy, and da 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 da. So from a logistical point of view, I could kind of get it. But at a certain point, I'm not a really good economics person, but I think I understand the basics. You get to a certain point when you have a certain number of investors in these companies, and you reach this threshold where you have to maintain a certain level or everything's going to crash. So I think at this point it's just about not losing billions and billions and billions of dollars, and to hell with safety. I mean, it doesn't matter, it's just a few people, right? So i, I think it's just about money. I think it's about implementing an idea as well, because I think once people have been fear factored into accepting that this is okay and suppressing all the downsides about it at the same time, then the next time it comes around, they're going to be like, yeah, it's fine. And there is going to be a next time around. This is just the beginning, like this kind of platform that they used. Um, and it has a lot of different applications too. We don't need to get too deep into that because I don't know much about that yet. But I've done a bit of reading, and if you want to, if you wanted to talk about the transhumanism thing, I mean that's definitely something that we're facing in the fourth industrial revolution, roboticizing everything. So I mean, who knows? Maybe the end game here is to digitize everyone first. Get everyone, digitized. You become a number type thing, which is the way that you can implement that really well and really successfully is by using immunity passports, for example. All you have to do is like tweak that and add a biological component. Yeah, anyway, I don't know, maybe I'm going off on a tangent now, but I kind of have a feeling that that's where all this is going. So I think that's another really really important reason to stop it, because personally I would rather croak than not be free. I don't want anyone to know where I am ever. Like, I don't even have a cell phone. I don't. I value privacy more than anything, because if you're not an autonomous being, if I'm not this autonomous being with privacy and rights, then what's the point? Like, that's how I feel. I don't think that line of thinking is common these days, because I mean, I have a few friends who are like, duh, but a lot, like, the majority of people that I know and that I have known are just like, you'd rather die than just follow a few rules? Like, they don't get what I'm saying, I think. So
Well,
it's not about.
there's a saying I've been using a lot on this podcast, thanks to a past guest, Hotep Jesus, who said on my show, and he's like, if I give you 50 feet of chain, are you free? If I give you 100 feet of chain, are you free? If I give you 200 feet of chain, are you? The point is, like, we they give us a little bit of chain, and then they want us to be excited, and then they give us a little more of chain.
Yeah, it's dog training.
Yeah, and it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, there's still a chain there. We should be upset that we're not free, not that we shouldn't be excited about just getting a little bit. That's the thing. Like, you're seeing it over and over again, where it's like, oh, isn't it nice not to wear a mask at the gym? Yeah, but shouldn't we be pissed that we had to?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. There's a guy here. He used to be an MP, and he's a lawyer, and he's fighting for the uh, the people like me who are living abroad as non-citizens. And anyway, he okay, fine. Maybe he's doing a good thing. He's like fighting for the rights of the expats, and like, oh well, they great success, great success. They just announced that we don't have to be tested twice when we go to a plane with all these certifications and double injections. You only need it once. Hooray! Great success. And I was doing the same thing to him, even though I know he's it's this facade of fighting for the right thing. It's not. It's like you're still inside this weird box of control. You have to get outside of that. None of this should be happening. There's no like medical reason to impose these restrictions on healthy human beings. Quarantining healthy people, I mean, doesn't that make you scratch your head a little bit? We're not dealing with Ebola here, people. We're not dealing with something like really, really, really infectious and deadly. We're not. We knew that early. Lowest mortality rate ever. Like, doesn't affect kids. We're so lucky. Hasn't jumped into other animal species as far as we know. Like, we really lucked out, if you ask me. And so, yeah, I lost my thought.
yeah, I do it all the time on the show. So,
But I
but
like that I got Borat in there. All right, success.
it,
I
it
love him.
it's so, but he's another one who's kind of fallen for it too. He was a
Oh,
part.
I know.
He's I've been so disappointed this in 2020. So many people that
I know.
I'm just like, I used to like you,
The
and
heroes are falling, man.
oh my god, it,
You
it
can't imagine like the Lancet. That's like the oh, it's like the journal, but no, like, and I'm in arguments, debates with my folks all the time about stuff. They think I'm like I'm a fringe granola. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Here's the reason why I will never trust anything published in the Lancet again. There's two. And anyway, I explained it to them and I'm like, but I cried. I actually cried because it's like I've dedicated more than 30 years of my life to this world. It's not just science, it's this academic world. It's this yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's like, guys, what happened to you? Like, why are you why are you okay with this? Why are you are like if you're if as far as I'm concerned, if you're not fighting against this, you're on board with it, and you're just as guilty as everyone. And when I say guilty, I mean really freaking guilty. I'm thinking about our elders who died alone in the first, part of this. I literally cried today about it. It's really affecting me, that part. And the kids, I mean, kids are innocent. They're just kind of like the victims of the adults. So it's like, it- yeah, yeah, litigators, like get out your computers and your scratch pads and get to work, because man, and I know they are. There's a lot of hope in our situation as well. I mean, great connections are being made, and maybe we will be able to rebuild a new world. I don't know, but you're right about people not having like really an easy time finding information. Like even if you go to seek it, it's like, and when you find information, how do you know if it's like verifiable if you're not like, trained in that field or whatever? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's why people like yourself who are trained in that field are. I'm so glad that you guys are willing to be outspoken. I've had Richard Fleming on. I've had our mutual friend Dr. Jack on, and so many great people because the thing is, if people hear from me, like I barely graduated high school. I don't have a resume that I don't, that's going to impress anybody besides just being curious about these topics throughout the years. But when they hear from somebody who's actually, you know, studied this stuff, their lives revolved around this stuff, and they're saying the same thing, I think it people will listen more often than not. If you have a PhD, or if you're well, and that's not always the case, because look at Bill Gates. He's not a doctor or PhD and
Oh
everything.
man, that guy. Ugh.
How did anybody it's
No.
crazy how, like, the all the people, the faces, the spokespeople for this BS are all falling. And yet, and this is why I don't think it was accidental that all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's give everybody their lives back. Like in Massachusetts, it was like almost out of nowhere. They're like, hey, we're lifting all the mask mandates. Go enjoy your life. See you later. And it's like, wait, what? Like literally in like oh, they literally had a press conference, and prior to this, like every press conference was like depressing, where they're like, the virus is still here, we still need to take precautions, and then all of a sudden like, hey, yeah, we're gonna lift all the mask mandates starting tomorrow, and go enjoy your life, go do some shots at the bar and have one on me.
Bye, everybody.
Exactly. And I'm like, but I was like super curious on like why, right? And then you start seeing like, the Bill Gates divorce, you start seeing the Dr. Fauci emails, all this. I'm like, oh, I get it, because people will just go back to their everyday lives and forget this shit will ever happened. And this is, and like you were saying, like our awful long-term memory is how they trick us into wars over and over again. It's how they're going to trick us into this again. It's like we're going to forget, like, and the other thing, it's like a quote I keep saying, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. It's also hard to convince them, like, hey, dude, you've been hoaxed. Like, this was like, you fell for it. And it's like, yeah, that's great. Hey, you want to go out to dinner? It's like, no, no, no. Like, it's just one of those things. It's hard because in a way we all do want to move on from it. Like we do.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this issue where I had this internal dilemma with this show when I host another show called the Union of Unwanted, which was actually the origin story of that podcast was actually me trying to bring a bunch of people in the alternative media community together to kind of create a community to help fight back against censorship and all the stuff that was going on in 2020. And then it kind of became its own show. But on both shows, it got to a point where I could sense that some people were just like tired of hearing about the topic and talking about the topic. And so I would go away from it at times. Then I would kind of like say, like, no, what, we need to keep talking about this. We need to keep talking about this because one, it's not going away, and it's not just affecting our present, it's affecting our future. And there's so much going on that we can't get tricked into saying like, okay, we messed up, let's move on to, let's just forget about this, go on with your lives and don't worry about it. And that's kind of my, that's something that I've been dealing with a lot lately in Massachusetts, is because so many people are happy to have their lives back, so many people are happy to kind of put this behind us, that I'm just like, nobody's going to be responsible for their actions, nobody's going to
Yeah.
we're not going to there's no way of preventing this from not happening again if we just forget about this, and we just move on. We have to.
Yeah.
So it sucks, but in a way we almost have to stay upset, right? We, instead of being grateful and happy that, like, we get to do some normal things again, we have to be upset of what they took away from us. And I talked about this on the show during 2020 about how in the US they finally are talking about, oh, the old people, but the virus kills the old people. Like, once it started kind of, because initially obviously that wasn't even a part of the narrative, that it's only dangerous or mostly dangerous to old people. It was like, oh, it's dangerous to everybody. Then they're like, well, yeah, but the old people, the high risk people. And I'm just like, wait, like, I come from Europe where they actually take care of their old people. In America, the second your grandmother or your parents become a hassle, you're like, hey, how about we throw them in an old home? I gotta go to work.
Yeah.
I gotta take care of my kids. And I'm like, and now all of a sudden you guys give a shit about the old people. So it's like,
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. I
it,
know.
it was so, because it really, like, the way we treat old, because I agree, like, the way we treat old people is pretty bad in America, like, in
It's
regard.
preposterous. I mean, I don't even get it from like a living being perspective, because our elders are the most valuable members of our communities. They know stuff. They've experienced stuff. They're our parents. They took care of us. They sacrificed so much for us. And I'm so appalled at not only what happened because of these people and their measures enforcing them, but because of this thing that you just pointed out about killing grandma if you don't wear a mask. And I was so ferocious about that when people were spouting it. It's like, how backwards and hypocritical are you being right now? If you did care about our elders, you would take it upon yourself to learn what's actually going on here in our old folks' homes. And I have a good friend in Australia who was in Victoria during all that phase 4 or level 4 lockdown crap. And I mean, she is like knows about what's going on in home care facilities, and it was appalling what she was saying. And I've heard it from many different sources. There's oh gosh, it's terrible that I don't remember her name. She's this older lady she's a Holocaust survivor, and she was giving these wicked ass facts about what's going on in New York in the aged care facilities. Anyway, I'll try and remember her name. Terrible that I don't. But it's my age. I'm getting old and senile. um, but yeah, it's like,
Well, how many people, like you said, had to die alone?
yeah,
I had
like,
so many people, and the thing is, the placebo effect exists. We understand
yeah,
it's a real thing. Actually, prescription drugs only have to be better than a placebo to get approved, which which shows the power of the mind, and also shows how ridiculous most pharmaceutical drugs are. But it's all the opposite is also true. If you mentally and emotionally feel better, you actually have a actual positive effect on your body. Well,
yeah,
if mentally you feel bad, you have a negative effect on your body. So
that's
many
right.
people who got the coronavirus, who tested positive, how much of, like, them feeling like shit was the anxiety, the depression, the being afraid of, like, this virus that's in their system that they just tested positive for. And then that, obviously we've taught, I'm sure we're both aware of the PCR test and all that nonsense. But outside of that, like, how much of, like, them feeling like crap, or their body, their immune system being hit hard by the anxiety and stress of just testing positive, was a contributor to them feeling like crap, and then also all the people who were in hospitals recovering, who needed their family and friends there,
And weren't allowed to see
and
them.
weren't allowed. I mean, I had a cousin who passed away in 2020 of heart issues, and fairly young. He was in his 50s, I believe, and I believe early 50s, and it was just one of those things where a lot of us think like, okay, well, he was having some heart issues late 2019, but and then 2020 he was super fearful of the coronavirus, and he didn't want to go get checked or anything because he wanted to stay away from hospitals and doctors out of fear of getting the virus. um,
Yep.
Maybe there could have been something there in regards to like, okay, maybe that prevented him from going to get looked at and going to get a checkup. Maybe he had some issues and he's like, I'm going to ignore these issues and wait till things get better in regards to the coronavirus. So there's so many stories like that. And then when he had a funeral, how many people like him couldn't have a funeral to finally get the closure that they wanted? They couldn't have a proper funeral because of all the lockdowns and restrictions and all this stuff. And just having somebody by your side, like that alone, giving you that sense of hope and comfort of having a loved one by your side, and just stripping those opportunities from people, and then just saying like, oops, yeah, we kind of fucked up. Like, that's not good enough for me. Like, it's not.
No, it's
um,
not.
I'm like you, where like I'm not one. I never hold grudges with people, in my personal life, because I'm just like, oh, that's too much weight on my shoulders, and I feel better when I just kind of let it go and I move on, because anger,
It's a waste of
it
energy.
is. It's a waste of energy, and it takes too much energy. And but when it comes down to this type of stuff, when it comes down to like government overreach, when it comes down to corporation greed, all this type of stuff, I stay upset about it for a long time. And I
No, but it's so important, and I'm so glad you verbalized it, because it's like it's we're still inside it. That's the thing that people don't won't recognize. It's like, just because you feel better because they let the noose like loosen a little bit, it doesn't mean you're not still attached to the chain. You are. We're still exactly where we were before. It just doesn't look like that. So it's not only like, it's a good idea, it's essential for everyone to stay frickin' poised with their dukes up, because we're just getting started. Like, this is so not over, people. Like, it's not, and it's not going to be, because if you think about the design, I mean, apart from all the stuff about where it came from and whether or not it was made, and what the purpose of that was, none of this had to happen. And it's so obvious by now. It should be obvious to everyone that none of this needed to happen the way it did. Like, and all the people who are culpable should be tried. None of these, not it just didn't need to go down like this, and it doesn't need to continue. Zero will happen if everything opens up tomorrow, for example. And I don't know if you're aware of what's going on in Canada. I just started watching a podcast uh, with Michaela Peterson and oh gosh, my memory's so bad. Ezra. Oh, help me out here. Anyway, I'm terrible with names. Anyway, it's a great podcast. Three Canadians, two in Toronto, one in Montreal, and an American guy who's interviewing them. And everyone's giving their perspective on what's going on in their respective cities, which I think is really important, because, I mean, you kind of need to know what you need to hear it from people who are on the ground, because the perception of how, it's going down in a country is so far from the reality these days. um I watched another one on Cyprus today, like what's going on in Cyprus. There's this, like, I don't know, there's some information going around about it that's completely not true. Da 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 da. Anyway, Canada, where I'm from, which is supposed to be the land of the free, is you would not recognize it right now. It's one of the worst places in the world to live right now, with regards to imposing measures, police enforced impositions. It's horrific, the footage that I was watching in Montreal. I used to live in Montreal. I mean, these are Canadian citizens. They're just people who are sick of this shit, and they don't want to be injected with some crap that's pointless anyway. It's not safe or efficacious. Like, and that's besides the point. Everyone gets to choose. Like, when did it ever become a thing that we're not allowed to choose what happens to our bodies? When did that become a thing? So it's like these are just normal people who want to be happy and want to live their lives, getting pounded to the ground by and outnumbered by people in riot gear. I mean, it's like, what? I mean, I saw it and I'm like, okay, a couple of bad things happened here, and we had a war recently, and but that stuff really freaks me out because it's like Canada is, it's, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say it, but isn't it meant to be a place where, people are, nice and free and, kind to each other and thinking clearly, and they have clean water and air and trees and, not to sound stereotypy, but I'm from there. I can be stereotypy. I've
Well,
lived
Canadians
everywhere in
are
Canada.
yeah, Canadians are super nice. Some of the nicest people I've had on the show have been Canadians.
And smart. Like, we're
Yeah,
smart. Like,
yeah. So
what
if you
the
take
hell?
a Canadian who listens to Slayer, that's like the ultimate.
Yeah. My brother is the biggest Slayer fan on the planet.
I love it.
Actually, he's Jordy Rose. He's the guy who built the first stable quantum computer. He started D-Wave. You might have heard of that. Um, anyway, he's like the biggest Slayer fan on the planet, and the second biggest Slayer fan on the planet was my PI for my master's degree at Memorial. One of the most brilliant HIV immunologists I've around. He is like a massive Slayer fan. Yeah.
You weren't kidding. Actually thought you were joking when you're like, "Oh, some of the smartest people I know are
No,
Slayer."
no, no. It's a thing.
It's well, the interesting thing about Slayer and music like that, it goes against the grain, right? So like you probably have this for myself, sometimes I try to think of like, okay, what made me want to go against the grain? And I saw it in my interest in music, where it was like I always liked stuff that was like outside the box, outside the norm, going against the grain. And I guess that type of thinking and that curiosity and things that are a little outside the box kind of seeps into every aspect of life and how you look at everything. So yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah,
My
that
question is always been, well, what's the grain? It's like I needed to know what the grain was, and so that's like I take things apart, which doesn't really make me a good computer programmer, which I really want to be. But I'm not good at building stuff. Well, actually, uh, I'm okay at building stuff, but I'm better at taking things apart. So like deconstructing stuff. So it's like, yeah, what is this grain? Like what? Anything
this
that's
is an
at
interesting
all.
question. I've never even thought about that. That's like that. You're right. I mean, that's like that's what I find so fascinating about philosophy. It asks those questions, and
Yeah.
it's like you don't just accept things. You realize like everything's subjective. Like there's no.
Exactly. You
I say
can't accept anything. Why accept anything? And that's like you have to have a foundation, because otherwise you'd kind of like not be tethered to this reality, whatever that means. But you have to question everything, and it's so hard because it's like you find yourself like questioning yourself, which then you have to face ego and all that, this baser shit, and it becomes a really interesting self experiment, which is why body autonomy is important, people. You can't give up your body and your mind. It's yours. It's the only thing you own. And it's fun, but you have to self experiment. You can't let others do that for you.
yeah, to me, the idea that any government agency or corporation is going to decide what to put in my body. I mean, and then the little concern about people's health is obvious when you look at the lack of conversation about exercise,
Oh my
sun,
God, yeah.
sunlight. I mean, I try to spend as much time as possible out in the sun. Same thing with my kids.
Yeah, me too.
I try to put as little sunscreen on them as possible so that they can, that's why when you said you were a surfer, I'm like, I could tell by your tan.
Yeah. It's
But
becoming like the summer here too, so It's full coverage. Vitamin D. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so you feel better. You just,
Yeah.
like sometimes people are like, "Oh, I just feel better when I'm tan," and I'm like, "It's not just like a cosmetic
No.
thing." I'm like it's internal thing. You just have more energy. That's why when you do go to places that are sunny, and it's funny because I have some cousins and a lot of family in Portugal, but my cousins that live in Lisbon, big surfers also. I didn't
Yeah.
actually did know that they're kind of there's a big surf community over there, but apparently it's pretty
Yeah.
popular.
Portugal has one of the best longboard waves in the world.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I haven't
One
surfed on it, but one day.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. But Portugal's a perfect example, and Florida, and anywhere where people are outside more and in the sun more, and with the environment and just closer to nature. I mean, it sounds kind of hippie, but
No,
it
no,
just
it's human.
yeah, it is. It's human. It's not hippie. It's human. That should be on a shirt.
Yeah. You can take credit. That's cool. Yeah, no, I think like to summarize what's going on, and it's just too hard for most people to swallow, is that this is a war that's going on right now. This is a war on humanity. There's absolutely, I'm not joking about that. This is a freaking war on everything that it means to be human. We are social beings by nature, and we need each other. We are the thing that makes human beings special is the fact that we can cooperate. And when you put a bunch of us together, it's better. We can build shit. We can create shit. Like a one human might have a lot of value. Okay, one person might be really good at something, but when you put that together with another person and another person who are really good at these two other things, then wow, it's synergy. They're trying to take that away from us here, and that's absolutely clear to me, and that became clear to me from the beginning. No hugging, social distant. What the hell is that? Like no seeing each other's faces. Have you seen the Saturday Night Live thing that they did with like the first date after the mask?
No, I didn't. Is it good?
So, oh yeah, these two people are sitting across from each other and they have masks on, and then they're like, "Oh wow, I just realized we don't have to wear masks anymore." So the guy takes off his mask, and she's like, "Oh no, I don't like the bottom of your face."
But
And it goes from there, so it's pretty funny.
But you were hitting on such an important topic. I was convinced, and I still am, that one of the methods, one of the ways, and one of the reasons why they got so many people tricked, and how the lie continued and worked for so long, was because of all those other measures. It was the fact that a pleasant encounter with somebody somewhere turned into an awkward encounter with somebody. You go to a grocery store, everybody's keeping their distance. They won't even shake your hand. They can't see your face. The inviting smile that made you feel excited about running into somebody, and they seem to be excited to see you, you seem excited to see them, you have some small talk, you catch up, like all that was gone. People weren't communicating. And if you want, and the thing about communication is that's how we share information. I mean, that, like you said,
Yes.
one of the many reasons why humans are so special is because, and it kind of reminds me of this quote, this MMA fighter, Justin Wren, said on my show. He's like, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And it's
Nice.
this, this tribal idea of like, yeah, as a community, we can all help each other. We can share information, and we're much more powerful in numbers. Well, you eliminated the ability to just share ideas with one another. So, like
That's
we are
right.
talking about before, everywhere I would go, if I ran into somebody, I would little by little start bringing things up. Like, hey, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Like, why do restaurants have to close at 9:30? I'm like, restaurants, the business is like one of the hardest businesses survive in the world. I'm like, now you're putting all these guidelines that don't even have any real science or statistics to prove that these guidelines are going to have any effect on the spread, but yet you're just hurting businesses. So it's like, and you're like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Like, oh, why do we have to wear masks going to the bathroom, but we don't have to wear them when we're sitting down at a table? Like all these ridiculous things. Why do
Yeah,
kids
dumb.
wear masks when we've never taken one measure ever to prevent the spread of the flu during the flu season, and
Yeah.
that actually kills young people? And so you start talking about this stuff, and it's like, okay, people aren't having these conversations. And if people were gathering and people were having these conversations, it'd be much harder to trick everybody. But because everybody was at home by themselves, by themselves, watching,
Afraid.
afraid, watching the TV, and also there's a lot of a reason to believe that if you give people enough information, even if it's conflicting information, people will just do the safe thing. They're like, because I heard this over and over again. Listen, I know what you're saying, Rick. I've seen that information, but I'm also hearing people say this. I don't know what to believe, so I'm just gonna wear a mask and stay home. And it's like it's just one of
Yeah.
those things where, and there's an older book called Merchants of Doubt about how like they've used these techniques before in other industries. Like you give people enough conflicting information, and
No, it's the
yeah,
protocol for war.
exactly,
It's
yeah.
tried and true. Like divide and conquer. It's really simple. I mean, it's brilliant in its evilness. But yeah, I mean, I've never been a hugger. I have like a few really good friends. I don't really have like I'm not one of these like everybody loves me people because I tell the truth and people don't like that. But it's like so I mean it hasn't really forced me to change much. But when I think about the impact on like okay, my grandma, who she was 99, God love her, she almost made it to 100. She passed away last year. Nobody's that sad because she was like everybody says their grandma is like the best grandma, but my grandma was. She had 5 kids, she was a nurse, she was a wife, she was absolutely never, ever, ever not smiling. She was pleasant. She created spheres of joy wherever she went. She was incredible right up until the end. And but she still hasn't had a funeral. We're kind of waiting. It's probably going to happen soon now that I'm talking about it. When things loosen up, like which they're not happening in Canada, but we're dad was talking about like okay we'll get together and have a funeral when we can, but it's like I mean I always have to go back to okay, why is it that this is happening? What's the reason behind it? um and it's just nothing seems justified. And when you're talking about this whole like restaurant thing with the masks like in the bathroom and then not at the table, I mean if you couldn't kind of see through that, I mean I don't know what to say to you. I mean it's just so ludicrous. Besides the fact that masks don't work, people, you need something like N99 in order to filter viruses because the filters are not small enough in the N95s to filter like zero point zero 0.05 microns or whatever the hell viruses are. So they don't work anyway. And the cloth it's just a breeding ground for bacteria, mold. It's not a good idea. You know, and that brings me to the other thing. You mentioned the seasonal flu. Uh, I don't think there needs to be a seasonal anything. I think the whole concept, the reason why we see these fluctuations, um, and I was a victim. I lived in Newfoundland, which is like one of the foggiest, rainiest places on earth, and so like if there's a virus floating around, then I'm gonna get it. But it's because it's dark. Like there's no vitamin D, so like the seasonal thing is not actually like anything other than uh, like increased deficiencies in vitamin D. So if the governments and the healthcare people and all these people who are pushing McDonald's fries in exchange for jabs got off their asses and started talking about vitamin D, like go to your GP, get your vitamin D level checked. If it's not above this amount per microliter of whatever, you need to supplement because your immune system absolutely cannot function optimally if you're vitamin D deficient. 100% of the people who originally were diagnosed, as having died from COVID were confirmed as being vitamin D deficient. Your immune system can't function optimally without vitamin D at at non-deficient levels. I can't say that enough. Zinc is antiviral. Chloroquine is a zinc ionophore, which means it helps zinc get into cells to do their antiviral thing. Quercetin, which is an active ingredient in onions, is also a zinc ionophore. There's so much that you can do without even going to repurpose drugs to prevent flu, to prevent COVID problems. Um, yeah, I don't know why I started talking about that, but it's like maybe I'm thinking more about solutions now. Winding down what you can do to if you are scared. I mean, I'm a human. I get it. You know, there's things to be afraid of. So if you're actually afraid of you know getting sick from this thing, then there are things you can do, like the things I just said, and they will work. It's not if, they will. Um, and if you
That's the
get
thing about so many people who are on TV talking about health. They don't know jack shit
health,
about health. Like, like you're a active person. I mean, you surf, which is a
yeah, I'm like a
super hard
hundred
thing to
years old, and I'm a professional longboarder. People.
that is why, I love, sports because it does make you understand your body a little better because
Yeah,
you understand like, okay, if I want to be, the most optimal, like I have to eat better, I have to understand recovery, I have to understand
yeah,
training, I have to understand
resting.
nutrition, resting, all these things. The average person on TV who is a doctor talking about health, like what do they do that's physically hard? What do they understand about like what the body's capable of or not? I mean, that's why you see so many times athletes are like, I was told I can never walk again or I can never do this again, and now they're professionals again playing at the highest level. It's like, well, that doctor's never played a fucking sport and doesn't know jack shit about sports and doesn't understand the incredible ability of nutrition and exercise, and you do all these things right, maybe even supplementation with whatever issue you might be dealing with. Like it's the body is a beautiful thing.
Oh
It's
man, it's a machine.
incredible. It's a machine. Its ability to recover from things. I mean, you think about it, you get cut, you do absolutely nothing, and immediately it starts fixing itself. Like I don't cognitively, like I'm not conscious of like, hey, I need to repair this cut on me. It just does it. It does it. It's just like it's an amazing thing. That's why, like, I mean, even the whole vaccine idea, like I mean, you're still trying to trigger your own immune system to create the best medicine ever, because that's where the best medicine comes from. It's from your body.
Yeah, and the other thing most people don't know about this incredible immune system thing is that we're constantly oh, my kitty just got scared. We're constantly being bombarded with pathogens, with chemicals, with molds, especially now. Like the Wow. I mean, the amount of stuff that we're constantly bombarded with in air, food, water, it's enormous. And I'm not even going to go into the plastic thing. We're like endocrine disrupted, like, limited. But anyway, we don't know. We don't know all these little micro like fights going on constantly because of this innate immune system. It's the front line of defense. There's like the innate branch and then there's the acquired branch. And the acquired branch is this T cell, B cell thing that you guys might have heard about. But the innate one is the silent one. It's like the NK cells and all these amazing molecules and mediators that are protecting you constantly. Your skin is part of it. Um, and yeah, that's the thing about this SARS thing. If you let the innate system, do you want to eat? Sorry. If you let your innate system do what it's designed to do, this miraculous thing, you probably won't even know you have this virus. That's what 90 something percent of people are reporting. They don't even, maybe they had the sniffles or something, but it's just an amazing thing, but it does need to be oiled like any machine. It needs you need to eat a good diet, and I don't mean a diet, I mean like don't eat forever chemicals. Don't eat high fructose corn syrup. That's poison. I'm not joking about that. Those brown liquids people swill down, that's poison. It's actually like it screws up your metabolism like beyond words, and that causes cancer. Um, Yeah, it's nutrition is medicine. I mean, that's what doctors should be talking about. Let's get away from factory fooding and get back to like growing shit in soil that isn't like full of crap. I mean, I know that's a difficult task now because I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of stuff coming out of the air from air pollution getting into the soil, but the earth and us and everything on it is so regenerative and intelligent in design. I mean, if we just frickin' leave stuff alone for a few years, imagine. And this is I go back to this human community thing. Like if we actually we need to rebuild shit because nothing is working right now. Nothing in the financial market, nothing in the medical, nothing is working now. Governments don't work. We need to rebuild. And even when we do, I really do believe that we have the potential to build something incredibly beautiful and sustainable. I mean, we literally just have to look at Mother Nature and say, okay, how'd she do it? Because she already did all this stuff. We just have to kind of emulate it. We have to become a part of it and reconnect because we are we're we are the earth. And if you constantly shit on it, then you're gonna be shit. That's the situation we're in. But that that's apart from all the well, no, it's not. It's all the same thing, right?
It is. It's all connected. I mean, you're seeing the closer we get to the digital world, the more I think we appreciate and realize we need to be connected to the natural world because you're seeing people who, all our health issues, our mental and physical health issues, our unhappiness, our lack of community fulfillment, all this stuff has to do with us going towards the digital world of like,
Yeah.
getting we're less tribal people and we're more like, oh, I want to get this beautiful house in the suburbs where I don't talk to my neighbors, I can shut the garage, I can go to work, work at a cubicle all day, not have to socialize or talk to anybody. Or now everybody's excited about remote working. Let me do it at home, I don't even have to go to the office and connect with anybody or talk to anybody. And I can be, just stay home and I can order takeout. It's like you're just getting closer and closer to those
The
sci-fi.
Matrix.
Yeah, the Matrix. Yeah, and those sci-fi movies of like connecting your body to a machine where you just get fed enough liquids and food to stay alive, and then you just live in a virtual reality where where you're.
So what would you want to do? Would you ever want to be like in the Matrix? Like whether regardless of whether or not you knew you were a part of the Matrix, like just conceptually, because I really wonder how like now that I've observed what's going on with people, I really think that the majority of them would want to be in the Matrix because they don't want to experience physical pain, for example, or
Well, let's
discomfort.
deconstruct that a little bit, just like that up.
Okay.
It's also something I like to do. I think a more important question is why, right? Why would somebody rather be in the Matrix? And this goes into a deeper question, and
Yeah, they don't want to feel pain.
they don't want to. But I think this goes into our issues with society, right? Like, I think you're right. The majority of people would rather live in the Matrix, live in some virtual reality, and get to, and they're completely okay with like giving this whole life away for this like, imaginary bliss.
Comfort, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's because of that it's all due to people who don't realize that you can find those happinesses here. It's like, for example, like I enjoy community. I think time is more important than money. That's why I don't like working any more than I have to, and doing more time doing. I always say like you can make more money, you can't make more time.
Damn straight.
I'd rather spend more time doing things I like to do and less time doing things I have to do. And to me, most people don't live like that. Most people are they were sold this idea that if you
Yeah.
get this high paying job and you get that brand new car and you get this big beautiful house, that the end result will be happiness. And then they get there and they're like, holy shit, like I'm not happy.
I feel so empty.
Yeah, and so I think those people who are a little lost and been tricked into this lifestyle, they would absolutely be like, well, fuck this life. Like, I have a boss who doesn't appreciate me. I have kids and a wife who I don't even get to see because I'm always at work. and then I try to make up for it by buying them stuff, and that doesn't work either. And like I always say too about kids, like we can learn a lot from kids. Like my kids don't care if if we live in $100,000 house or $1 million house. They just want dad around. They want me to be
Yeah.
around. They want to hang out. They want to enjoy each other's company. That's all they want. So it's like, so what happens? Like we're all like that as kids. Like we want to be around people. We want to be around our friends. We want to be around our family. We want to laugh. And then the as we get older, we get told like, hey, like stop being creative, stop using your imagination, stop. And there's been studies where they ask kids at a young age like how many of you are creative, like they all raise their hands, and then as time goes by throughout the grades, less and less kids raise their hand. And it's not because kids aren't capable of it, it's because we've created a society and a system that says this is useless, this
Yeah. Standardized testing.
yeah, exactly. So I think the question is, how do we create a world where people wouldn't rather be in the matrix than be here? And it's because the world most of us live in is unfulfilling and full of unhappiness. But it's also because we've been told to find happiness in all the wrong places.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I have my own thoughts about the whole happiness game. I think this is also like, I don't think people should strive for happiness. I think it's a good thing, but I think that it's more important to strive for truth and and
But isn't
joy.
truth subjective? Like, what? Even truth. Like, a lot of times people are like, people will suggest my show, like, "Oh, you want to hear some truth? Listen to this episode." And from like, I'll see them like tag me on Twitter, and I'm like, "But what's truth?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess
I think like things that you can find in and we can debate this all night, but like there are things in nature like I find truthful, like I don't know, the structure of water. I don't know, like things like that, like baser truths. The truth of perhaps that lies in the perception of our reality. I don't know, like things like that. Like but I'm a
but it's true based on like our senses, like right. So it's like
yeah,
even
the
like so
perception exactly. Like
so and so that's
yeah.
the thing. Everything's perception. Then can anything really truly be true? Right?
Well,
Universal.
what's the thing with the tentacles of the like if each human wow, we're getting really deep now.
I
Like
know.
if I'm just an extension of something having an experience and so are you, then what's the something? Like and then you get into the whole god thing and I don't know. Anyway, I think a better word to use in lieu of happiness is joy. I think they're very different things. Like I get enormous joy from the simplest things that most people they don't understand. Like there's a cat that I go to feed who just had some babies, and I spend like 15 minutes with her every day, like just being with her, and I get joy from it because I it's a bit selfish, it's like how do you separate like selfless and selfish things, but like I get great joy from feeling like I'm helping her be healthier to be able to feed her kittens. I get great joy from seeing a flower like in bloom, and I know that sounds really dumb, but I
But it's
really
not.
do. When I
It's
see the yellow like daisies flowering, I actually it, I don't know. It's an experience for me. I feel like they're little points of sunshine, and they're just smiling back at the whole world, and it's all there all the time for you to see if you can see it. And yeah, it's like most people don't. I feel like most people don't understand. Like I'm a very habitual creature. I do the same thing every day. I have like rituals, especially if there are waves. I go surfing, and the joy that I get from that, I mean, is indescribable. But every surfer knows the feeling. It's like there's nothing to describe that feeling of catching a good wave. But
but that's so important in life. Like I
ugh,
I always had this fight with my parents because my parents came from, I was born in a house with no running water, but I came to America and they wanted to give me a better life. And when they say that, like they've been sold this idea that the better life meant more material things, right? So it's like we're gonna go to Portugal, leave this farm and this house with no running water, so we can go to America and get these. It'll give you the opportunity to make money, and it's everything revolved around money, and it almost creates some
Yeah.
trauma where like I just never like I try to take it away from like my thinking as much as possible, to the point where it's kind of a flaw of mine, but it's
No, me too.
growing up, I just like money was always like the thing we fought about. It was always a thing we were trying to save more of. Like everything. If you weren't making money, like to my parents, it was like, what was the point of doing it, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I felt I love music, and when I started playing music, it's like the first question is always like, can you make money doing it? And it's like, who gives
Yeah,
a
I
I'm
know.
like, I can make
I know.
happiness and enjoyment doing it. I'm like, isn't that important? Like, and same thing with sport.
No.
No, you're right. Yeah, and playing. I love playing basketball and soccer, and it's like I that competitiveness of like trying to push myself to can I do better? Can I get better at this? And just the enjoyment of when you do it, and just pushing yourself. Like I just having those internal challenges, I loved it, and like they, a lot of times they didn't understand it, and
No.
so
Yeah, I
and
know. I
so
get that.
yeah, and it's just one of those things where like finding joy in those things are so important. A lot of these things don't require a whole lot of money or resources.
No, it's like the joy is the antithesis of money. Like it's funny. I had Cyndi Lauper's song stuck in my head in my session this morning. Money changes everything. And that happens to me sometimes. Like Monday changes, and I'm like, why is that in my head? Am I supposed to be noticing something right now? and But yeah, no, money is evil incarnate. If you ask me, it's like it screws everything up. I mean, and I'm just like you. I'm not good with it. I don't put value on it. It doesn't have value to me. It's an exchange mechanism, and I'd much rather use something like that's backed by. I'd much rather use gold or silver if we were going to talk about exchanging, money for goods. But yeah, I had the same thing. It's like if you can't make money from it, then there's no point. And I'm like, wow, I'm really glad I didn't listen to that stuff. And I'm kind of like been this weird nerdy rebel because I wouldn't have done anything I've done now if I believed that money was the end game. Like nothing. I wouldn't have gone into research. I wouldn't have become a surfer. I wouldn't have become a dancer. I wouldn't have become a musician because none of those things are
Importantly,
profitable.
you wouldn't have become the interesting guest I had on today because I think of
That's
all
right.
these things.
That's the end game.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, it's like, and sometimes,
Thank you, by the way.
no, thank you, but for the awesome conversation. One thing that's I deal with, and I'm sure a lot of people who think like us deal with sometimes, is that I'll have friends or friends of friends who are super successful, right? Like you hear about their beautiful big house, and oh, the wife doesn't have to work, and or they all, whatever, all these things, and then you become like, you almost have this sense of like, am I a failure? Like, how come I, like I,
No, that's the system. Like,
but that's the thing. Like,
you know,
yeah, it's a system. We've been tricked into believing that, like,
tricked.
yeah, and we've been tricked into believing like that's the way we should live our lives, and everybody should live their lives that way, and that's a sign of success, and that's a sign of accomplishment. And it's like, well, what the fuck have you accomplished it? But you've donated all your best years and of your life and all your energy and days and time to some corporate company that gave you some money, and the second you croak, they're just going to replace you. Like,
Yeah, and what have you done for another human being today? Like that's always a good question to ask. You know who my favorite person is who lives I live in a place called Haifa in Israel, in a small community called Bat Galim, which translates to um, girl of the sea, which is kind of fitting, I suppose. um, anyway, my favorite person, I do a lot of walking and a lot of thinking in my daily ritual. So there's this man. I think a lot of people probably thinks he's deranged. I don't know what he's been through. I've never talked to him before, but I see him every single day. and he sits on a bench. And he's the only person who feeds and pets, like has physical contact with the really rough cats, like the feline immunodeficiency virus is really common here, and so is this like herpes virus that causes them to lose their vision, their sight. So there's a lot of cats that are really hard off, and most people would look at them and say, "Oh, I'm not going near that." But this guy, first thing in the morning, like 8 or 9 in the morning, he's on this bench, drinking his beer. He's always drinking. He's an alcoholic for sure, but whatever. And he's snuggling these cats, and I am. I mean, animals and I we're connected, and cats probably a little more so. I don't know why. I just love them a lot, and so I can see the behavior of the cats in response to him as well, and they love him. To put it in a few words. And I think about this guy, and I have these conversations in my head about like rebuilding society all the time. And I'm like, so what kind of people would I want to include in a new society if I were to suggest building one? And I think about that man all the time, because to me he's very constructive, even though most people would write him off as a vagrant and a drunk, and he's petting gross cats. It's like, no, 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 no. That guy is, he has a ritual himself. He's habitual. He's dedicated, therefore, in my opinion, to caring, which is another important quality, which I think a lot of people lack, for hurting people, which is another thing that a lot of people won't step out of themselves to do. They'll see a sick something and they'll be like, more inclined to stay away than to approach and help. Anyway, I think he's kind of like a beacon of light and hope. I don't even know why I started talking about that, but
I
yeah.
swear that we're like the same person. It's the stuff that you observe and you find fascinating, and the way you look at things. I like. It sounds like I'm like that's exactly how I look at things.
Oh wow, a kindred
Boggles my mind.
spirit.
It's so wild because like
Aw.
those observing those little things, and like I'm always so curious with people's story. Like you see somebody, and like you said, somebody who you might look at, or initially, or the average person might look at and be like, okay, whatever, you just walk right by. I'm always like curious, like who
Yeah.
are they, what do they feel like, um to
How did they get here?
yeah,
Like right now.
that's to me, it's because, and that's the importance of history, right? It's like, you understand today when you retrace your steps backwards and kind of find out how you got here. But this goes into another topic that, the way this kind of thing that we're talking about, makes me so I've done shows on like the child trafficking issue and the pedophilia issue, and this
Wow. This
very
is something that takes up a lot of my time, bro.
really, yeah, and
Yeah.
it just, and so I've done shows on those issues. And one thing that I talk about sometimes, and I've done it with, I think one time I had like Whitney Webb and Ryan from The Last American Vagabond. I brought this up. I had, also, who was it? I'm trying to think who was it that we were talking about this, and it might have been Nick Bryan, who wrote the Franklin Scandal book.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just like they're so emotionally, it's such an emotional topic where you want to dislike and hate these criminals, these people who are traumatizing children. And but yet, like, I'm like you, I like to deconstruct things. I like to ask the why. I like to kind of not just go with the wave, but like go against the wave and even question why I think or feel something. And I'm like, yeah, but like those criminals were victims. And
Yeah.
what if I, start looking at it as like, okay, because in many cases you see it where the person that now we're like, yeah, he's a bad person, he's doing these bad things. Look at his story, and you look at his story and you're like, oh shit, he was an innocent little boy or innocent little girl. He was an innocent child who had a bad person do bad things to him, and now
Yeah.
he's, has become a monster. But it's really easy to dislike and hate that monster, but that monster might be a monster not because he was destined to be. It was because he was, he was mentally and physically injured or traumatized, and and it's weird. It's not weird because I understand it, but I know when I bring up these conversations where you almost like to sympathize with somebody who's doing such horrific things, like a lot of people's first reaction is like, no, 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 they're fuck them, they're monsters, they're, like, they deserve to, burn in hell forever. And it's like, I'm very much like you, where like I'm kind of I mean, and when I became a parent, I only got worse, but I always
Yeah.
to sympathize with people. And even like the worst horrific person, I try to see things from their perspective and try to understand them and sympathize with them. And it's those are one of those topics where you don't see a lot of that, but it's very common where you see uh people who do horrific things are people who had horrific things done to them. And
Yeah.
so it becomes this, to go, I guess, not to go down another rabbit hole of like a philosophy, but like, this goes into the whole free will thing. It's kind of connected to that. Like, okay, are we 100% um, responsible for our actions, or in can we look at it as like this person is responsible, in a way. I guess the counter argument is like they're not responsible for this, for these actions, because these things happened to them that led to him making these decisions, and he didn't have control of those actions, that happened. So it's like it's a very deep kind of um confusing, topic and an argument. But I think even having the willingness to look at it and entertain these arguments is something that people won't even do because of like what you said. And I'm trying to bring it back around because I've lost my train of thought, I think, once or twice during this rant. But I think
Well,
it's
I can easily bring it back around because it comes down to people waking themselves up. Like a lot of people don't even want to talk about that subject, which is it really does take up a lot of my time. I've watched every single frickin' thing, documentary, interview, because it's like, whew, I mean, talk about an insidious problem that's infected humanity. I mean, and why? I mean, that's we don't have to go there, but to solve the problem, you need to acknowledge it first. And that's the same thing with this whole COVID thing. I mean, people need to acknowledge the very basic concept, that we're in a problem here, and it's not the problem that you're being presented. You know, it comes down to that thing where I said that people start to feel better, but it's like, no, 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 nothing has changed. You're still exactly where you were. You just feel a little better because they've made you feel a little better with their signals and triggers. But yeah, everybody needs to just take a little leap of faith and maybe question yourself is first start is the first way to start. Like that's like the hardest thing to answer right now. Like um how do you approach the subject of helping people to start to see, like, one on one? That's a great idea. um but what about people who don't even have the, I don't know why they wouldn't, but a lot of people don't have the ability to just look at themselves and ask if it's possible that they're wrong. Could I be wrong? How many people do you know can actually do that? I mean, I don't know very many people myself. I do it all the time. I do it like twice a day at least.
well,
Could I be
I'm
wrong
the
about
same
that?
way. I I question. I'm so not positive about anything. Like I'm just like every time I'll react to something like, could I handle that differently? Did I overreact? Maybe I was looking at it from my perspective, but if I look at it from their perspective, they actually have a more valid point. And it's like you have all these internal dilemma. Well, that's why the power of leisure, right? Like, um, it, people talk about how this this idea,
Power of leisure. I love that.
yeah,
The
like
power of leisure.
It's I know. I just said it out loud and actually
No, it's great. I love it. It's like the fulcrum of resistance.
yeah. Well, so they talk about it in regards to and very few things in business ever stick with me. Somebody says something about business, and I'm just like, oh, that's I could care less. Let me just move on to the next topic. But this was interesting because I heard about this in regards to somebody talking about how there's this philosophy in business that having some people who have downtime and leisure time is beneficial, right? And so, and I started thinking like and this is why, because they were saying you do your thinking, you do your creative thinking during those moments, right? When you have downtime, right? So, when you're going for the walk, like you said, I'm the same way. Like I'm very that's why when I went to Florida, I went to LA Fitness because even though we went to Florida, I have to go to the gym because I go to the gym every morning, and if I don't feel
Yeah,
right, and I feel like something's
exactly.
missing,
Yeah.
and so I'm also a creature of habit. But it's also leisure time for me, right? So like between sets, between workouts, I'm sitting there, I'm one with my thoughts, I'm thinking, and that's when a lot of times you gather your thoughts or you rearrange them or you question them, and to me, like, that's so important. So many of us are stuck in this like, especially in the East Coast, because I live in Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. It's like super fast paced lives. It's like, gotta go pick up the kids, gotta go to the no, next thing, we don't have time to do that now, I gotta rush and do that. It's like, when you ever have time to sit back and just think about, like, okay, I'm going down this road. My road, my life's going down this road, and I just keep going down this road full speed ahead. But I don't even have a moment to think about, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't even have took this turn down this road. Maybe I'm going down the wrong road. Maybe I'm not happy with where I'm going. And so the power of leisure, like having that downtime, and this is where, like, people who are more connected with nature, I think that's one of the other benefits of it, is like sitting there with nature, being outside, not having distractions. One of the million topics we talked about today was music, and when I was writing and playing music, I would come up with, like, I would write my best at night when I didn't have distractions, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have a phone, I didn't have anybody calling me, I didn't have any distractions. I was almost at peace, and so I think that's, people need that. It's a valuable part of getting to what you're talking about, and that's like questioning yourself, asking those questions, doubting yourself, uh, trying to understand those doubts, like all those internal conversations that are necessary in regards to for growing as a human and becoming a better person.
Yeah.
Because it's really
Exactly.
easy to not connect with people when you're like just going down your own road and you're super busy and you don't even have time to feel bad about how you overreacted about something, or how selfish you were on one thing or whatnot. It's like, typically, that's how people live. They're just full speed ahead. They don't, like the whole New York minute thing, like, drives me nuts. I remember first time I went to New York City, I bumped into somebody. My first reaction is like, hey, sorry, and they're just like already down the street. They could care less. I'm like, this is crazy. People live like this. I'm like, people just don't even care about other people at all. Like, they're just like, go, go, go. And it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, there's just something about that type of city life that is just, I understand being attracted to the energy. There is an energy of being around people and being around just that many people who are motivated and all that stuff. And I guess it can motivate you. But
Motivated.
I get, but I guess some people need that. Some people need, just like that, those motivational speakers. I think they're silly. Like, this guy is literally motivating you to be successful, but the only successful thing he's ever done was motivating you to be successful. I'm like, he's never done
Yeah, and he goes home and cries for sure every night,
it. Exactly,
which is okay.
which is okay. So, yeah, I don't even know what my point was, but
Yeah, the momentum of life, it traps you. But yeah, it's interesting. The thing that I love about, okay, I hate running, but I do it. It's because I love what running does for me mentally and physically, I suppose. I care way more about the mind than the body, but the body's important too. I'm an athlete, so I guess I don't have to, care too much about that. But um something happens when I run with my mind, and it's like my mind is like all the time. It's going crazy. So it quietens. I suppose that's what happens when you meditate, and I'm horrible. I've never meditated in my life. Um, but I'm very interested in it, and I've heard people talk about it, and I've heard about the experience of meditating, what benefits you can achieve, and it's very appealing to me because it's this quiet. It's like the in between thought stuff that I get to when I'm running in spite of myself. And it also happens to me out in the water. Like if I'm having like a 3 or 4 hour surf session, I'm surfing is a selfish sport. First of all, it's a very solo thing for me, and I'm absolutely not one of these come up and say hi to me people in the water. I it's because of my nature. I like solitude because I feel like I have a lot of figuring things out to do. Although I recognize it, and I also feel like I should ameliorate that to a degree because I don't feel like I'm social enough in that I probably could be making someone else's day a little brighter if I just did something small, and I think that's important. Like just I don't know, tell someone they look nice or something. But anyway, it's in those moments like in between waves, in spite of myself, again, like when I go on runs, that I have these in between thought times, and that's when the best way I can describe it is it's not me, it's not coming from me, it's coming from something else, somewhere else. It's like I don't know, the universe or the guides or whatever you want to call them. It's like you get these like knowledges or messages. It might sound kooky, but this happens to me all the time, and they're very insightful. And it's like that's when I find I learn the most, when I stop frickin' thinking, or when it happens in spite of me. Um, anyway, yeah. Now I'm going off on a tangent. What was there ever a pandemic? It's like you and I have totally forgotten about it already. It's great.
These
It's
that's something I've always loved about philosophy was just like just I just really attracted to just constantly asking questions, even questioning uh answers that you thought you already established, like
yeah.
just like, okay, I think I'm here, like I've decided that based on the information and the thinking, I've reached this conclusion. But and then it's like, okay, well, let me reevaluate how I got here and why I got here, and if there's any other outside motivations to get here and all these other things. I do this show on Rockfin, which is like this alternative video website, and it's called Ricky Rants and Rockfin. And one of the shows I did, and it's just me kind of like just talking, sharing ideas, was called Philosophy versus Ideology. And I was kind of like just going through this whole idea of how dangerous ideologies are, and how once you decide like I'm a capitalist, or I'm a libertarian, or I'm a whatever,
Yeah.
like it completely just puts a halt to thinking. Because what it does
Yep.
now, it's like I've reached a conclusion, and once you reach a conclusion, and then that means like you're not going to entertain any more ideas, you're not going to entertain anything else. Now once you reach a conclusion, what's the next step? The next step is defending that conclusion and that thing I reached every time I have a discussion, because now I
Yeah.
have to defend how I got, or my ideas. And so like that type of thing is just so, like having those internal dilemmas and having those internal arguments and fights and questioning yourself and being I guess there's probably a sense of secure. I don't know, but there's something nice about feeling like confident about ideas, because it's like you feel like, okay, I have a better grasp on things, because it's like, okay, I've come to this conclusion. These are my ideas. There's something maybe scary to some people about like just saying like, hey, I don't know anything about anything, I'm not certain about anything. Like I think that's scary for a lot of people, and so it's much easier to join a team. It's much easier to join a team and defend that team, or to I guess take on an idea and say this is the best of all the ideas, and now I defend that idea, than it is to constantly be seeking and searching for more answers and more ideas and more different conclusions. So it's but I think these things are very necessary. That they're necessary for us to grow as people. I think it benefits us as people, and if you care about yourself and you care about people around you, you should always be self-improving. And that's not just physically, but mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, self-reflecting too.
Yeah,
Yep.
but
If people would do that right now, it would be a game changer.
yeah, no, I completely agree.
Like, I mean, right now, like before these mothers inject their children with this stuff, like yeah, it's too bad they're probably not going to do that. But
Well, I truly believe in the ripple effect, and the idea that we can all make an impact. That's
hence the
Yeah,
name.
hence the name. And so I think we're all doing our part in being brave enough to have these conversations and putting them out there and then sharing them. And somebody listens to this and maybe we change their mind slightly and they
I hope so.
yeah, and then they share it with somebody else, and they share with somebody else. So and this goes back to kind of what you said, because I think it's I'm a true believer of not just sharing information, the ripple effect of that, but the impact of the ripple effect of that, but also just things, simple things, like you said, like you talk to somebody and you're in a good mood, and you put them in a good mood, and then they talk to somebody, and it just continues. And obviously
Yeah.
the reversal happens too, where you're in a shitty mood, you're kind of crappy to somebody, now you put them in a bad mood, and then they're going to take it out on the next person. They're going to take, so we're all making a difference and having some impact on the world
All the time.
all the
Yep.
time. So for people who are listening who are want to connect with you, I know that it's just probably not what you want to do is connect with anybody. You want to be left alone. But if are you on if you're is there any websites, social media platforms, any places where people can keep up with your work and you
Yes.
send people?
Yeah, I actually just made a website, which was a funny 2 week hair pulling out exercise for me, which is basically a place where you can go to see my updated R code, which gives you the figures, like many figures of many different things, as part of the analysis of the VAERS data. So the VAERS data is updated weekly. So if you're interested in seeing how the numbers are going up, you can go to https://. I do not consent with hyphens in between those words. Netlify It sounds weird, but it's like the best way to make a website from R and update it automatically. So yeah,
Well,
that's the best way.
send me that link and any link that you would want in show description. I'll put it in show description. So
Sure. I have a YouTube video that I made to present to Vaccine Choice Canada, which summarizes my results from like a month ago, and it's going a little bit viral. So I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on that in terms of like, thank you for explaining something that people are making way too hard for me to even care about thinking about looking at. So, and I've also had people tell me, you helped me make the decision not to do this right away. So it's having a really positive effect, if you ask me. It's making people think. That's very positive.
yeah,
So yeah.
so send me also a link to your YouTube channel, because I'll put
Oh,
that.
I will.
Yeah, because I know it sounds like you've done quite a few videos throughout
Yeah,
the.
it'll be shut down soon too. So
Well, yeah, well, get it on. There's some great alternatives to
oh,
put on.
everything's going on Rumble now. So
Yeah,
I'm slow but sure.
yeah. Rumble. The cool thing about Odyssey is Odyssey.
Yes.
You can sync your YouTube channel to Odyssey, so it uploads immediately by itself. So that's pretty cool. But
Eek, that's great.
yeah, so and I'm a big fan of like just pushing, helping these alternative platforms. I'm also on Rumble recently. I'm on Minds, Float, a bunch of them, because it's just, again, like I know I'm gonna eventually get kicked off YouTube. I've already had a couple of videos pulled from YouTube, but so it's just a matter of time. But
Yep.
luckily, most people listen to the show. They don't watch the show. So and the audio has been more or less like not touched. They haven't really dealt with censorship too much, besides like one Del Big Tree episode, and maybe a handful of them I've had some issues, I think. But for the most part, it seems like the safest place is the audio format. People can listen to this on iTunes, Spotify, all the places, and That way you connect right to the RSS feed. You're getting the stuff right from me, and there's no middleman. So, but thank you so much. I know I've taken a whole bunch of your time. We talked about so
Oh,
much.
it's
This was
so
a lot of
amazing how it
fun.
goes, and like you never know. But I am getting hungry. That's how I knew time had passed.
The
So
natural call.
no,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure. I wanted to ask you your sign because it's very scientific of me to do that.
Yeah. I was born in April 19th, 1985. So,
April 19th. So you're an Aries?
Reeves. Yep.
Wow, how interesting. I'm a Scorpio.
So, oh,
Yeah, we're not supposed to get along, but we do.
yeah.
It's the message to the world.
That's really good. You're right. That is a great message. That idea that sometimes people that you think you will not get along with, you do get along with, and you might have more in
Yeah.
common than you think.
Not just that, we're kindred spirits now. We got to do this again.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, there's about a billion other things I want to ask you, and we could talk about. I think so.
Yep.
These are like without a doubt like some of my favorite conversations, the ones that kind of lead everywhere and anywhere, and I just think that like when you just stay on one topic sometimes, one, it can get a little boring, but I think people are really complex, and learning about all these other things that make them interesting to me is interesting, to me. So I hope it's interesting to the listeners, so, and that's one thing that I get a lot of positive feedback on with the listeners, is that they say they'll have somebody who's promoting a book or somebody who's an expert in the field do all these shows, and they answer all the questions the same way. They get asked all the same questions. Then they come on my show, and something takes us down some other rabbit hole. And next thing you know, they're learning something completely new about this person that they didn't know about. So, but that's what's fun. All I'm trying to do is capture a casual conversation, and hopefully that the listeners enjoy it as much as the people participating.
Now, I think Jordan Peterson said it best lately. I watched a podcast him talking about like the death of the big media thing, and it's moving more toward this independent media creature like podcasting. And he says I loved what he said because it's just so it resonates with me, and I also believe that it's true. He said, I hope I don't get it wrong. Um, why don't I just put it this way? He alluded to the fact that podcasts were the most brilliant way, like this live podcasts were the most brilliant way to do this kind of question and answer thing, because the people listening and watching get to see the live interaction and the body language and the tone and the timbre and all the beauty of the communication as it's happening. And this isn't scripted. You and I never met before, and it's like I think most people would agree that they're attracted to that kind of thing. Like it's interesting to see two people interact. Like for me, it's the most interesting thing of all. Like people watching is very interesting. So yeah, Jordan Peterson said it better than that, but that's what he said, and I couldn't agree with him more. I've been doing a lot of this live podcasting thing and meeting thing, and people ask me like, do you want this to be like recorded, or do you want to just like fly by the seat of your pants? Because a lot of people don't like that, and I'm like, no, I want the live. I would be put on the spot. I want to make the mistakes. I want people to see who I am, because there's no point in not being authentic, because it's not real, and people aren't going to learn. So I don't mind making mistakes, and I don't mind people watching me make them. So it's like anyway. I'm on a tangent again. Okay, yeah, let's sign off.
But it is a very human aspect, and I think people do appreciate just seeing the human aspect of people.
Yeah,
It's like we're
yeah.
not perfect, and if I meet somebody who's too they have no flaws or too perfect, I'm like, this motherfucker's fake. Like this, I don't know who they are. I'd rather have somebody who's blatantly honest, like you said that you are at times, because at least I know where you stand and who you are, instead of somebody who's a chameleon and just trying to fit in everywhere. And so yeah, without a doubt. But I'll send you this show once it's up and live. I'll send you the links.
Yeah, great.
Feel free to share it, post it anywhere you want, and I'm sure we'll stay connected, and we'll talk again hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, let's do this again soon. And
Yeah.
I'm sponsored by Pfizer. No, I'm kidding. Ha ha ha
I don't think Pfizer's going to be liking our show too much, but
ha. I don't think so either. Yeah.
but thank you so much, and and enjoy the rest of the night. And like I said, we'll hopefully we'll stay in touch, and we'll talk again soon. This was fun.
Great. Yeah, it was amazing. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye, viewers.
Bye.